Well, welcome to the No Show. My name is Andrea Edwards.
I'm moving around. My name's Tim Wade. It's like I'm in a ship.
And my name is Joe Augustin, and welcome to the No Show. It's a show that is, well, kind of about knowing. And although sometimes when you listen to us, you might not get that impression. It depends how last minute we've actually come onto the show. So, Tim, welcome back. We haven't seen you for a while. You're a sight for sore eyes.
Yeah, or I'm a sight that causes sore eyes. But yes, I've been away for a little while. It's and I'll be away again. Actually, I'll be here next week, but the week after that, I'll be away for a couple of weeks in Australia as well.
But you'll be by yourself next week.
Pardon?
You'll be by yourself next
week. None of us will be here next week. That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
We've got
a convention to attend.
We have a convention. It's I'm looking forward to that too.
Now, Tim's been busy with studying up and picking up on biblical studies, but I didn't know you would go all the way with the haircut as well.
That was, it might have been a mistake having this haircut because I'm about to go into an Australian winter, and having a bit more hair on the head is usually quite good. Otherwise, I get a bit cold, but it should be all right. Be all right. They say there's a week between a good haircut and a bad haircut, and I got about 4 weeks before I redeem myself from this one.
So the objective of the show, for those of you who are joining us perhaps for the first time, is it's a show to help you kind of have a look at all the news, as much of the news as you can at the same time. We don't just look at one side of things; we look at as many sides as possible. And as I've been trying to say the last few weeks, we hopefully make you the most interesting person at a dinner party, if not the most irritating one. And to also make sure that we have a diverse point of view, or diverse points of view shared on the show, we bring a guest on. And this week, we're very, very pleased to have with us someone who is an international motivational speaker, and also, of course, and this is the thing that I'll need him to confirm as soon as he comes on, because I want to say that he's been voted his company's been voted the top sales training company in Asia. Would you please welcome to the show Tom Abbott?
Hey everyone, how are you?
Very well.
Good.
Nice to see you, Tom.
Yeah, good to see you, Tim. Andrea, Joe, how are you?
I'd like to vote Tom's company the top sales company in Asia. So there has been a vote.
There it is.
I kind of remember reading something like that. I'm not sure if I have that wrong, but if not, you can misquote me.
Well, there's been several years where he's been winning awards.
Yes, well, we've won awards in the best sales training provider category in Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong about 5 or 6 years in a row.
Nice.
Well, that's pretty much Asia, isn't it? There's
It's
nowhere bigger than those three places.
Not too bad. Yeah, and we're really excited about that because that's at the HR Vendors of the Year Awards, and that's really not our peers kind of like upvoting us on social media, like, wow, Tom, you're cool. It's not a popularity contest. It's really senior leaders, HR practitioners around the region who look through our application and they do some serious background checks and get a little bit more information than I think they need to. But it really helps them make a determination as to, who are some of the big players in each industry. So I've always been really proud of that.
What I really like that qualification because and it's sad that we have to qualify like that, but there are so many awards out there where you either get it for showing up or you get it because you've paid money to be part of the group that will be awarded, or you get it for just going, hey guys, upvote me, I've got more followers. But this is the real deal. This is people who are actually hiring businesses to do this and are recognizing quality out there in the industry. And so congratulations. I really admire that. You don't need to put the word guru after your name because you've got legitimacy from clients.
Yeah.
But that photograph of you that you submitted in the Speedo, though, I think it really helped.
Was he on a horse?
Whatever it takes.
Yeah, nice one.
Yeah.
Very nice. Well, nice to have you here. Today we're going to talk about lots of news. And Andrea, can you tell us a little bit about what Tom's special segment's going to be about when we get to that?
No, we're going to talk about the current state of sales, how nothing's changed and everything is changed. So I'm looking forward to that. And because I think it's a really interesting topic, so many people have got different perspectives on it. And I like the way that Tom positioned it as both. So, but Tom, give us a bit more background. Tell us your story.
My story?
Yeah.
Geez, like where do I start? 1971, born, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. Lived in Vancouver for several years. That's my hometown. But my wife, Elaine, and I moved here to Singapore in 2008 and really didn't know what to expect. But we thought we'd give it a go. We started working here. We started the business Soco sales training in early 2009, officially incorporated in 2010. And, really haven't looked back. The rest is history. We've got a small team, around 10 people, about 5 or 6 based here in Singapore. And then the rest, we have some freelancers around the region. We also work with a number of trainers around APAC and the world. In fact, we just started working with one in Europe, which is really exciting. We've got one in the US as well, to kind of serve our international customers. We've always been a regional sales training company. And that's one of the things that really has separated us from some other individual trainers, is our ability to work with teams across the region in multiple languages, which is really exciting. And in the last year or two, we've had some customers that have really helped us grow beyond the region a little bit. I mean, we still specialize in APAC, but we do have some customers where we're serving around the world, which is really exciting.
Nice. So I met you probably pretty early in on the journey. The last couple of years for you in the business, has it been okay? I know a lot of people in our field have really struggled. How's it been for you?
Well, it's been more than okay. I mean, I hesitate to. I mean, obviously, the last 2 years have been a really difficult time for a lot of people, especially in our industry, among others. But obviously, if you're in speaking, training, coaching, anything that involves conferences and events and people gathering, you've been, possibly devastated your business. I know a lot of our peers have really had a hard time and haven't recovered. That first wave, I remember back in 2020, I just got back from Canada. I was doing some work. We have another business in Canada. So I was doing some work in that capacity. And I was on the plane, was just starting to hear a little bit about this thing that was known as the China virus. That's how it was referred to in Vancouver, BC, Canada at the time, was the China virus or an Asian virus. But there wasn't really much news about it. So I hopped on the plane. I'm flying back to Singapore, going through Taipei. When I get off the plane, I check my WhatsApp messages and I can see my wife Elaine is saying, "Hey Tom, is everything okay? You've transited in Taipei. Is everything fine?" I'm like, "Of course everything's fine. What's going on?" She's like, the world's upside down here with COVID, and flights are being canceled and people are being quarantined and all of this. So I kind of made it back home before things went really crazy. But, aside from, I think, February and March, which for us, it was like zero revenue. There were literally no events and events being canceled or postponed. We did a really good job of getting all of our customers who booked with us to either postpone it or immediately convert to virtual. So we've been doing virtual programs for almost a decade. But that's just been with a few customers. So we had to before we'd have to pull them kicking and screaming, but we were ready to go. So, and we've always seen that there was going to be this transition to virtual. So, and we work with regional teams, as I said. So we always did have the capacity to work with teams remotely, even before COVID. So for us, the transition was actually very smooth. We just doubled down on our efforts, made sure that we didn't lose anything. And in fact, we launched a few new programs, how to sell virtually, how to manage a virtual team. So to be honest, it was only, I think, 2 months, which were really challenging. And then May, we got back to our pre-COVID revenue. And then it's been a great 2 years for us.
That's awesome. Awesome. I think that everyone I know who was prepared, had already been virtual, seemed to succeed a lot more through the times.
Well, what's interesting, Andrea, is, you can probably see over my shoulder here, I wrote the book Social Selling in 2015. Yeah. And in fact, that book is based on workshops that we've been doing since 2010. So virtual selling, remote selling, hybrid selling, these are things that we've been doing and talking about for about a decade. So, and we could see that over the last few years, there's been this trend towards people working from home, working remotely, working from anywhere. So we knew that hybrid, people were working from home, which means they're buying from home, which means you have to sell from home. So for us, this wasn't, it wasn't a jaw-dropping thing. It was like, yep, we saw this coming. We were prepared for it, and COVID just accelerated it. But guess what? We're ready to go. So let's get going. And we told companies too, what are you going to do? Are you going to wait it out? Like, you still have revenue targets. Like, companies still have revenue targets, and they still have, and I've always felt that there's still consumers that want to buy stuff. So the world did not get, to a standstill. Like, some were severely impacted. Obviously, when we look at circuit breaker here in Singapore for about 1 or 2 months, everything was closed per se, but especially, F&B and all of that kind of stuff. But everything else was still going. And I just feel like it was people's mindset. A lot of people took a wait and see approach, and let's just see. And this isn't the right time to be selling. It needs to just be, caring. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you can sell with compassion. Like, you can serve your customers. Like, keep your shingle out there. Let people know that you're still around, and you won't skip a beat, because business will go on. It's just a matter of will you be servicing them or someone else? So I tell my team that, some hard work and good fortune, really paid off. So
just back to the format of the show, we're going to be talking about the news and responding to it, and also just having a bit of a slant. So for me, when I send out the invite to Tom, I was thinking to myself, I'd like to see how we can approach some of the problems that we always bring up on this show, and how we could use a sales-driven approach, perhaps, to solve some of these things. Because, I think that if you think about it, and with due respect to vegans who are watching the show, they're not always the best salesmen in terms of what's good for the planet and stuff like that. So let's plow ahead. Let's have a look at what's in the news, and then let's shoot the breeze.
Cool.
Yeah. Sounds good. All right, let's get stuck in. So starting off with our nice story, of course, it's the Queen's Jubilee. And it's been a lovely little distraction in the world. I don't know if you guys have been noticing it. Yeah. The Queen seems quite frail, and I she had COVID, and they think there's a lot of warnings about her health, and she's got to take it easy. But I don't know, she kind of feels like she's out there giving it a go and just living life to the fullest, because obviously I think she knows her time's coming to an end, and just seeing her turn up at the Elizabeth line, the new tube station, I thought was or tube line, I thought was really cute. Have you guys had a look? And she's got a big concert coming up. Queen and Adam Lambert will be there. I wish I was there. Have you guys had a look?
Yeah, I like it. She turns up to Paddington Station to formally open the Elizabeth line. She's 96 years old. I just think she's amazing. Imagine what she's seen in her tenure. It's just incredible. And when you see a movie like the King's Speech, where he's stuttering away in the movie, and that's her dad. It's the time from her as a little girl then through to now has just been phenomenal. So, there's countries that are divided a little bit by the British Empire and what that means and everything else. But as a statesperson, as a stateswoman, and a head of state, I think she's just been remarkable. Remarkably resilient, remarkably patient with the nonsense that happens in the world. And good on her, because we're not going to have her for much longer, I don't think.
Yeah, and in her own family, of course, right?
Yeah.
When talking about nonsense. And we're all Commonwealth people, right?
Yeah, I'm Canadian, so definitely. My take on it is I've never really been that interested in what happens with the royal family. I know some people are like, oh, Kate Middleton and this and that, and Harry and this and that, and I'm just like, they're people. So I don't really get starstruck or fascinated by these things, but I really do love Tim's approach, his point of view around just her as a person and what she has seen. Holy smokes. And she really is almost that linchpin, or that tipping point between kind of the old world and now. I mean, really the whole royal thing to me doesn't have much significance in 2022, to be quite honest. And that's why we're seeing around the world. It also brings up some really horrible memories for a lot of people. I mean, if you're Commonwealth, white, colonial, then you're like, you see her and the family through a very different lens than if you were colonized.
Yep.
So it's just very, very different. So,
Yep.
Good for her. Good for her doing what she's doing. And I love to see people out there doing stuff, but I'm not a huge, I don't get excited about, ribbon cuttings and things like that.
And I mean, it depends on the color of the ribbon for me, but with the, when you think about England, and if you remove the monarchy from England, how boring would England be? All they would have left is Boris Johnson and football. So
he has the coolest hair. He really does. I think he puts Donald Trump to shame with that hairstyle.
I think Tim could reach down right now and pull out his hairstyle. If I'm not wrong, right? You've got it right next to you.
He's got his hairstyle.
So if you noticed, I went dark. It's because we just had an electricity drop out. So hopefully everything's back on track.
You're all
for me with the Queen, it's a respect for her, and for her work, her discipline. She's always worked hard, and that's what I admire about her. The rest of the show I couldn't care less about, but for her, I have a respect for her as a woman, and I think she's carried herself incredibly over the years. So that's where I
really do enjoy some of those like movies like Elizabeth and things like that. Like I love, I love a good thing of history, and I love to see like, why is the world the way it is today? And I find that fascinating.
And what have we lost? Because there's sometimes when you watch those shows, you go, wouldn't it be nice if we still had that sense of decency? Or wouldn't it be nice if we still had that, those sorts of things? And then there's what have we gained, of course. There's a lot of change that's happened. But
it's all contextual and all a matter of perspective, isn't it? Because when we talk about the decencies, again, it depends who you were, what your class was, what you looked like. Decency looked very different to different people.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Standing okay here?
Pardon? What's that, Andrea?
Is everyone standing okay and connected here? I'm getting lots of
We're good, but I think you're having some connection issues. You're a little bit pixelated and
frozen.
Frozen.
Yeah.
From time to time.
We'll call you Elsa from this point.
Yeah, but I've seen worse. I've seen worse freezes than that. That's not bad.
So, you're back. You're back. Do you have a thunderstorm at the moment? Is that what's happening up there?
I can see a storm, brewing outside. But there's been throughout the day. There's been these little flickers, and it's in Thailand, so it happens. Let's move on to another story. So the US soccer has agreed to equal pay for both the male and the female teams. So the American women are not getting a lot of good news at the moment. So I thought that was a great news story that we should be paying attention to, and they well and truly deserve it. Especially the American team is phenomenal. So I was pleased about that. I know
the women's team is much better than the men's team.
Yeah,
and the men's team are okay, but the women's team is been winning all the awards. This is groundbreaking. This for sport is phenomenally important. So the deal is that the women in the national team, because in the private teams they get paid based on individuals, but in the national team they get paid whatever they get paid. And so they've struck the agreement that the men's team, players in the men's team, players in the women's team will get the same pay, and they will pool all the prize money from the tournaments that they're in and share it equally across the men's and women's team. So if the women's team wins the Women's World Cup and the men's team gets knocked out in the first round of the Men's World Cup, weirdly enough, the men's team will probably get paid more, even though the women's team wins the tournament. So what happens is all of the prize money goes into a pool and it gets distributed evenly across the national teams. So from that perspective, I just think it's really, really amazing. It's groundbreaking.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is in that sport for sure. I mean, I'm a huge tennis fan, as some of you may know, and there's been equal prize money for both the women and the men's tour for a few years now. So in soccer, sure, groundbreaking. In tennis, no. But it raises some interesting questions because, you know, and one has to tread very lightly when they say what I'm going to say next. It's like, I'm all for equality of opportunity, but not necessarily equality of outcome. So what does that mean? Well, again, I'm a huge tennis fan. Love women's tennis. Like, they're off the charts phenomenal. And as Joe was mentioning, my perspective from a sales context is, well, what's the viewership? You know, who's filling the stadiums? Who's sponsoring the events? Who's watching? So if one sport is just more popular than another, whether it's men or women, I don't care. If one sport is more popular than another, if you've got certain players that are more marquee and a draw than others, well, then those players, those teams, those events and sports should naturally get more, right? Again, equality of opportunity, like everyone gets the same shot. We all start with the level playing field. I 100% support that. But, you know, you start getting into quota systems and this and that. Look, when we look at tennis, for example, and this is probably a little bit different from soccer, but I can only speak to what I know. In the Grand Slam tournaments, like the French Open coming up, the men always play best of 5 sets. The women, on the other hand, always play best of 3 sets. But the prize money is the same. So if a man wins the French Open and he plays best of 5 set matches, walks away with $4 million. Hello. Hello, we're in the wrong profession. Actually, we're not. We're just not talented. But anyway, different talents. $4 million. The women's French Open champion will also take home $4 million, but she plays best of 3 sets instead of best of 5. So there are some men that say, hey, the minute the women want to step up and play best of 5, I'm more than happy to give them equal prize money. But then they're shunned as being sexist. And it's just like, no, dude, I'm just talking economics. Like, it's just, you know, so that's kind of how I see it. I'm all for equal opportunity, but not, you know, quality.
Well,
I'm just going to say Brigadier's here, Brigadier Sushal's here, and we're happy to have him. I agree with that. You know, when I was in the military, there was a lot of sort of talk about the fact that women, you know, we did push-ups differently to men, and we did different things that were different to men, right? And the reason we do it is because we're physically different beings, right? Men and women are different. But like,
be careful, Andrea. If you say that to some extreme left-wing people, they'll say, no, everybody's the same. We have to treat everybody exactly the same.
But the impact physically on the body, you know, I know what you mean, but the impact physically on a body for a woman to do 3 is the equivalent of the impact on a body for a man to do 5. So, you know, it's those sort of things. But the majority of money earned in professional sports isn't what you get paid at tournaments. It's your sponsorship. And that's where the real money comes in when it comes to being a sports person. So, like, if you look at the Williams sisters or, you know, Djokovic or any of those sort of people, what's that balance sort of look like? And, you know, typically the men still come out on top anyway. But I think, you know, that argument, I appreciate it. But at the same time, I think that there's another story. And the other thing, of course, is...
I don't know. Sorry, Andrea. On the flip side, you look at someone like Maria Sharapova. There's been a lot of players out there on the women's tour that made a lot more than some men in endorsements just because they were attractive. And
of course.
Results. So it goes both ways, right?
Yeah.
And I was going to say, Tom, your 3-set, 5-set argument has a small flaw in it, and that is that the man can play pretty badly for 2 sets and then go, okay, let's get this together and come back and win and clean up the. Whereas the women, they've got to be on their game for the whole 3 sets. They got
as a broadcaster.
I know it's a lame argument. It's a lame
argument, but I understand the point.
Now, from a broadcasting perspective, there's always going to be two ups and downs, right? Because I didn't know about this before, but you actually sell more commercials in a 5-set game. It's just like you know, American football. I mean, it's a short game, but it takes 5 hours, right? I mean,
I think people have to understand the economics of it, right? I mean, it's all about money and commercials and sponsors, but also just the athletes. Like, if we want to talk about equal pay, then let's do the same job. So if I have to play on average 3 hours and you only have to play an average of an hour and a half or 2 hours, I don't understand why we're both being paid the same. And it's not a gender thing. It's not a political thing. It's just an economic thing, you know? Now, if, however, the women's tour is, and there have been times when the women's tour and the women's matches have just been way more exciting than the men's, well, then that's reflected in ticket sales. And in that case, definitely. You know, tennis is an interesting sport because you only get paid for performing, which is very different from some team sports where they sign a contract in advance and all of that. But you don't win, you don't get paid. And that's one of the things that I really do admire about, you know, professional tennis.
Yeah. So going back to the actual soccer story, I think what's really interesting there is they're not saying it from a team's perspective and individual contracts perspective, but they are saying it when you're representing the nation and you're on that national stage, and it is a 90-minute game for the men and the women. So on the length of time argument, you could argue it's the same.
100%.
And for absolutely sure, the men's team has a lot more people watching it globally, men's football than women's football, but they're bringing women's football up, and there are tournaments happening, everything else. And personally, I don't really watch the women's football, but partly because I don't think it's televised here. But I do watch the men's football. So there is an imbalance in viewership, partly, and also if it was on, I might watch it, but it's not on. So
that's the thing. A lot of it, Tim, is a chicken and egg thing because I don't know if it's because I'm getting more gray, but as the years go by, I'm playing a lot more doubles, and holy smokes, I love watching doubles tennis. Yeah. And Elaine and I just played a tournament mixed doubles. We made the semifinals together, first time playing as a team, which was awesome. And we're still together, which is good. But look, they never televise doubles on TV. You know, it's always singles, and you know, but it's a chicken and egg. More people play doubles than they play singles. So if they aired more doubles on TV, would viewership go up? It's the same thing. The prize money in doubles is pitiful. Now we don't see doubles players going, oh, I need to get paid as much as, you know, the Federers and the Djokovic's and the Nadals because we're doing the same thing. It's like, dude, no one cares. Like, no one cares that you're playing mixed doubles on court 13. You know, they don't care. So, you know, what we have to do, I think, is to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to play and to compete at the highest levels and to be compensated fairly for the value that they're bringing, and that they're given those opportunities. And so regardless of the finances around this, it's I think, a good move that women's soccer is getting noticed. And I think anything that shines a spotlight on any sport that needs it is a really good step.
Yeah, it's a lot about airtime, especially. I mean, you know, really, I was getting a bit more involved than I usually am with sports broadcasting the past few weeks, right? You know, like there's a Chelsea women's team, there's a Man U women's team, there's that whole bunch as well. They play in smaller venues, but they treat them very much like the big events that they would be elsewhere. I mean, the venues are a bit smaller, but the excitement that they have with the commentary, it's all there. And if something isn't on TV, I mean, that's really how a lot of people work, is that it doesn't kind of exist, right? It hasn't had a chance to have the audience go like, oh, I recognize that. So like what's recently happened in Formula One as well. I mean, they haven't got Formula One for women yet, but they've started the races in similar cars, and they have a women's race right now. They don't have as many venues, but what they're doing is they're running 2 races a weekend every time they do a race, so they get 2 sets of results and all that. But it is coming out there, right? So the other problem is also who pulls the levers or who holds the levers, you know, in terms of letting these things on TV.
Well, this is so interesting. Yeah, sorry, Joe. I hate to cut you off, but because I want to build on something or just kind of clarify something you had mentioned about Formula One. So look, I watch a little bit of F1. I'm definitely not an F1 aficionado by any sense, but there is this really cool show on Netflix that I love that gets me excited about it. I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, it's a really cool show.
Drive to Survive.
Something like that, right? But so I don't know. I mean, there are some sports where obviously we do need genders separated just because of the physicality that Andrea talked about, and that just makes perfect sense. But Formula One driving, I don't know. I'm not enough of a driving aficionado to say that there should be 2 tours. I mean, I don't see why women shouldn't be on an F1 team driving these awesome vehicles. So,
yeah.
But I could see that as coming down to something as simple as how women lose perspiration versus how men lose perspiration, because it's such an intense sort of 90 minutes in the car. And, you know, the show that you've been talking about, which actually got me into Formula One for the first time, you know, and if over time we'll see, can women compete at the same level? And if they can, and there's no, you know, it's just equal, then great. But but then the other thing that Tim was talking about is like media opportunity and media coverage. So in Australia, we've really seen a real transformation in the last 4 years. Female cricket and Aussie rules football with female teams. And the country's getting behind it, but the media's got to get behind it. The exposure for the girls. You know, the Australians are so proud of our Olympic swimmers, but we're not proud of all these other female sort of sports that women excel at. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and you know, we're still dealing in many countries. Like there was a story in Malaysia a couple of weeks ago where the female team went in taekwondo or judo or something. They couldn't even get the money and the sponsorship to go to this European World Cup, and they somehow scrambled it together, and one of them won. You know, nice. So now they've got the attention. Now they'll get the money. So that real investment needs to start younger. And, you know, and let's just be honest about, you know, we have to know the difference between us. We have to. And what that means as far as what you're capable of doing. But, you know, time is a measure of physicality, to me, isn't necessarily correct if our bodies, you know, physiologically work differently. So, you know, I didn't expect this story to create so much conversation. I thought we'd be onto the fact that plants have been grown in soil from the moon for the very first time.
Just before we go to the moon,
okay. We're going to go back to the girls.
Yeah, just before we go to the moon, the thing about the TV rights part is that there's a mindset that is still in 1970s, and we've got streaming of everything. And if we're going to get streaming of somebody watching some other TV show, and that's streaming, then surely we can stream women's sport. You know,
there's more opportunity, right?
There's so much nonsense being streamed. So I know it's expensive to have a live broadcast, but there's a lot of people that can be out there learning to commentate, learning to do all of this at the lesser watched elements. And there's a lot of people that would be happy to do it. And even if it's not streamed or broadcast live, which there's absolutely no excuse with all the live. I mean, if we can live stream this, they can live stream a women's football match, you know? So if there's really no excuse for not having it available. And with all those pay TV channels to have more content. So I get the men's football. So I've got a TV channel where I can watch live games only on the weekends. Because I bought the television and it came with it for free, and I'm a bit too tight to pay for the midweek ones, but I can see all the recording programs. So the midweek ones are all at 3 a.m. anyway. But I can watch the recordings, the playbacks of the actual match if I really wanted to sit through the whole thing. There's no reason why we can't have all of those in there. So it's
no, there isn't. And you know, I subscribe to tennistv.com. I have for several years. And it used to, a few years ago, stream all of the ATP, which is the men's, and the WTA tournaments, Women's Tennis Association. But somewhere around licensing and negotiation, they stopped airing the women's, and now it's just the men. Why is that? We love to watch women's tennis. It's freaking amazing. And Singapore, my gosh, when we had the WTA finals here like 5 years in a row, Elaine and I were there every day during the tournament. It was just amazing having it in our backyard. They're off the charts, next level, super amazing athletes. And look, we pay whatever we pay to see them. It's world class. And when some people are like, oh, but it's just the women, I'm like, then you just don't know freaking tennis, dude. Because it's world class, and they would kick your ass in a heartbeat without even trying. They're amazing, and it's just great quality tennis. And even like I was just telling Elaine today, I was on Facebook, which I'm rarely on, but I was on Facebook this morning and scrolling, and my feed is like all PGA and LPGA, and they're amazing golfers. Like, so to me, it's not about gender, but what we need to do is to make sure that any little boy or girl who wants to do anything has the opportunity to do whatever they want, and there's no one going, oh, sweetie, you have to do this. There's a cheerleading thing, and you can cheer on the boys, okay, sweetie? We can't have a world like that. Any girl who wants to do whatever the heck she wants, whether it's tennis, rugby, golf, wrestling, whatever, there's something for her. So we've got to have something for everybody out there.
And those role models need to be on TV.
Well, there's a bit more going behind this as well, because I mean, like I have friends who are in the broadcast world and doing the WTA in Singapore, for instance, right? In the first year and then the years following, what they had to do in the end was actually not light certain tiers of the stadium because it wasn't being as well attended in real life as well. So I think there's so much more going on than just saying, okay, we got to have this for everybody. We got to be giving them access and all that. I think that the promotional aspect is definitely part of it as well. There's right pricing, like would it be better attended if it was right priced? Has it been priced, like too exclusively? Whatever. There's so many things that have to come into play, and for. And I'm sorry, Andrea. Well, we will finally get off this topic where the three guys talk about women.
What a great topic!
It's a great topic.
I'm happy.
It's also about well-held ideas by people in power. So, like the NBA, I mean, women's basketball, for instance, in the US, had this really huge problem because there wasn't enough money to pay the women as well. That's what they were saying, and factually, it was correct. But the reason it happened is because the men's, and this is college basketball, by the way, the men's college basketball was being paid for as a big contract, and the women's basketball was being thrown in for free. So they literally wasn't the money. I mean, not for free, but as a bundle with a lot of other stuff as well. So the main thing was the March Madness. Thing that they branded it, and they made a big change, by the way, as well. I think this is the first year that the women's basketball has also been branded as March Madness. But it's that kind of thinking by those people already kind of around that creates a problem, right? If you talk about when would I schedule prime events, you not likely want to use the prime time for a women's game because you'd go like it's definitely the wrong thing. But you've also got to do some. I mean, I think you got to go through the metrics and check for sure as well, because I do think it's a hard decision for someone to say I'm going to schedule a women's event which hasn't proven itself to be as popular in place of a more popular event at its prime time. Would I do that?
Well, it's a chicken and egg thing. And let me add something here. I also used to love MMA, mixed martial arts. So when I was a younger man, I'd be watching the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, every time it came out.
Hang on, Tom, are you about to go to jelly wrestling in a minute?
No.
Okay, good.
Right. But so what ended up happening, right? So if you've heard of Ronda Rousey, so about 10 years ago, Ronda Rousey comes out, and Dana White took a big gamble to start promoting her and to start building up women's MMA and showcasing these fighters. And I got to tell you something, Amanda Nunes and Ronda Rousey and a whole bunch of them are amazing fighters. So if you love the sport and the art, bring it on. And in fact, something that he did a few years back was they had a woman's title bout was the headlining fight on the card.
Wow.
That was fantastic. The headlining fight on the card, right? And so it's possible and it's doable. You just see it as kind of two sides of the same coin, but we don't need to compare them exactly because they're not the same. Obviously, as Andrew, you look at the heavyweight men and you're just like, wow, whoever gets hit first, it's game over. Do you know what I mean? It's a power thing. But with women's MMA, they're faster, so there's more hits. And let's be honest, I mean, if they're attractive as well, the guys like to watch them in the weigh-ins, and I mean they know how to play it up. So guys and girls love watching women's MMA for various reasons, right? So there's definitely precedent there.
Yeah.
Just before we go to the moon, Andrea, the last
to the moon.
Yeah, the last thing that I noticed in that article, was the quote, "This is a truly historic moment." And the quote continues, but the quote is from the US Soccer president. So the president of US Soccer, Cindy Parlow Cone. And I think the fact that the president of US Soccer is a female has a lot to say about the change that has been brought in to the association. So I think more women in leadership, you're going to start to see the perspective coming in rather than a bunch of guys in the back room going, just televise the guys, nobody's watching the women.
Quo. Yeah.
And I think
for her.
and I think for that, I think it's if guys are worried about their position, they perhaps need to think a little bit more broadly rather than just playing the same old game that we've been playing in the 80s, because stuff's changing. So
I don't think anybody should be, worried about their position. My gosh, I mean, we talk about this in Asia Professional Speakers Singapore, that we all work together to build a bigger pie. We're not fighting for the same piece of the pie. We're building a bigger pie. Yeah. So it's not about who gets more air. There's enough out there for everybody. And I think this world now more than ever, when everybody's got their own YouTube channels that they like and they're getting their watch lists on these streaming platforms, there is enough out there for everybody to enjoy. So just a lesson to anybody: create the content you want, do the sports that you want. There's going to be an audience for you. And now more than ever, easier than ever before, you can get people to be fans.
Yeah. See, my goddaughter in Australia is, I think she's 16 now, or 15. She's 15, and she is going to be an Australian women's cricketer. She absolutely will be. She's already representing Victoria. She's phenomenal cricketer, and she's been picked in boys teams to play. So she's. I mean, that isn't happening at the national level, but she's going to be there.
That's
so
awesome.
I'd like to take some credit, because I do remember bowling to her when she was about 5.
Well,
her mother wasn't letting her play, so I think it's because of me. But
it's all about you. Yeah,
it is. I have to take some credit for her amazingness. But she's So she's it's there. It's just great that the platform, and I love what Tom said. Any little boy or little girl should be able to watch role models and think, I want to have a go at that, rather than being forced into some sort of gender role based on a stereotype from the 50s.
Yeah. And also take the judgment away. So I was a teenage bodybuilder, right, which wasn't considered a very feminine sport, but I loved it. And I was cycling at the same time. So I had my leg muscles were the ambition of the men in the gym.
Oh, wow.
Cool.
And
I
loved it.
I had a client conference once where I was emceeing, and we had a panel of senior leaders from this financial organization, and I had this sort of Q&A thing happening, and the audience had to guess who it was, and the other members of the panel who had to guess who it was. And one of the questions was, I was the head cheerleader for the cheerleading squad for the football team at college. And they all chose the woman who hadn't been chosen yet. There was 2 women on the panel. And no, it was a guy. It was this big guy, was the head of the cheerleading squad. And everyone was like, what? And he goes, of course, that's where all the pretty women were. Why would I be on the boys team? I want to be with the girls.
I don't want to hang out with guys in a locker room.
And I was just like, very smart. Very, very smart. But
I think the consensus, like Tom said, every little boy and every little girl should be able to pursue whatever path they want to take, and as long as they're doing no harm in the world, and we've just got to open the world up for all of those opportunities, and the role models.
And Andrea, that applies equally to sports as it does to sciences, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Everything.
You know what? I think we definitely have to move on. We're agreeing.
That was the segue.
I was going to say, we have to move on because we're agreeing too much with each other. There's 4 of us and we all agree.
No, we started off with big controversial.
And go to the moon to plant crops, then let her.
Yeah. So anyway, they've planted some plants in moon dirt, which is called Luna regalis. I've never heard that word before, but anyway, apparently, so it's a success because it grows, but the plants actually get stressed out by the experience. So not going to be a solution for us to migrate to the moon anytime soon when we destroy the planet. But anyway, another story that's really
can we say it? Go ahead, Tim.
All right.
If the plants are getting stressed, it should be good for wine, because they like stressing the grapes to make amazing wine. Imagine getting some moon wine.
So all I'll say about that is, I read that story, and what was really cool about that is lunar dirt that they brought back from one of the expeditions like 30 or 40 years ago, which is amazing. I'm trying to picture it, like someone's like, "Hey, dude, you've got something on your shoe. What is that?" No, it's just some dirt from the lunar landing. Just knock it off. And they kept it somewhere or something. And they finally figured out, let's do something with it. And that a plant could grow in that in some way is awesome. I love science and I love space exploration. And what I love about it is not so much the let's colonize the moon as much as let's figure out how we feed people in sub-Saharan Africa. Let's figure that out first. Can we do that? So let's use technology and science, the things that we discover, to try to, we're trying to, like, Elon Musk likes to talk about, let's, what's that term again? To
colonize?
To make something like the Earth. What's that term? It's in my
head. Terraform.
So, he wants to terraform Mars. Well, why don't we start by terraforming, La Terre, the Earth, let's make it better. If we can terraform Mars, we can fix the problems on Earth. We can do that. So let's make sure we actually do that. And I mean, my God, don't get me started. $40 billion aid package going to Ukraine from the US while they have homeless people and people who are not eating in their own country, infrastructure falling down, unemployment, high inflation. But the minute there's a war, the military industrial complex, we got something for you. We got money for you. Healthcare in the US, nope, can't afford that, but we can afford this. So it's just very interesting where people and nations put their priorities. So let's start looking more inward to home.
Yeah, absolutely. No disagreement there. But let's stay in space. So it's now cool to see UFOs. There's been quite a few pieces. There's a great piece in Rolling Stones, but it's been the first hearing in 50 years for the US Congress. And basically there were 400 incidents reported, which is 250 more than the 143 included in a report released the year before. So basically the military is saying it's cool, we're going to make it easy, we're not going to make a fool of you, we're not going to laugh at you if you see a UFO, because it's actually part of national security. We need to know about this stuff so that if there's a risk, we can mitigate it. So I thought that was a pretty cool little story that was going around. Do you guys have a...
I love it. Let me just say a little something. If there's a risk, we can mitigate it. Sorry. If there's UFOs, and I believe that, sure, we've probably... Look, anybody that's smart enough technologically to do space travel from wherever they came from that we can't even see, if there's any danger to us, we're not mitigating it. Like, if they want us done, we'll be done. Do you know what I mean? Look, anytime we look at history on the Earth, anytime a more advanced civilization has visited a less advanced species or civilization, it has never ended well for the less advanced species. Never ended well. So why would we think it would be any different when and if we get officially visited by some extraterrestrials?
Because of the rules. Because of Starfleet.
The Prime Directive?
The Prime Directive. And yeah.
The Prime Directive, but that only applies to humans. It doesn't, like, that we don't interfere in their stuff. But I don't think they all follow the thing. Is,
people aren't. The aliens are going to leave Earth alone because we've got too many satellites and debris orbiting the planet that it's too dangerous for them to fly in. They'll come in and get hit by something and wipe themselves out. Anyway, yeah.
But they're here. They're around, So, I mean, like, there have been so many sightings. And now more than ever, when people have got, cameras at their disposal, there's going to be more and more sightings, more and more reportings. I find the topic fascinating. I mean, I could talk for hours about, UFOs and extraterrestrial life. And for me, inconceivable that there is not intelligent life out there. It's just mathematically impossible. We were not chosen in the whole universe to be the only sentient beings. That doesn't fly with me. If we just grasp a little bit of science and you do some math, it just would stand to reason that there are countless species out there beyond in the cosmos, beyond what we are capable of seeing, and certainly well beyond capable of getting to. But I don't know. There's just something, I don't know about you all, but since I was a kid, I've always been fascinated with the solar system and the galaxies and universe and all of that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's a part, the kid in me wants there to be life out there as well.
Yeah.
But like, no, I want to echo back to what you said a little bit earlier though, Tom. There is this massive amount of money going into the search for it when there are problems as well. And I quickly did a look up. We spent in 2020, we spent $49 billion for that first space shuttle in today's rates, it would have been $49 billion. And we have a huge space program with all of this sort of stuff. And it's important to get to understand it, and at some point you got to spend the money to get to understand it, and the cheaper time is now rather than later, where every dollar is worth a lot more and all of that sort of stuff. But when you said aid packages can snap your fingers and go there when there's real issues in your own country, or real issues in different parts of the world, or real issues wherever you're sending whoever's sending aid, then that is it starts to beg the question, what are we doing? But
it's interesting. I mean, we obviously have to prioritize our spending, right? And not everyone is going to be happy with how we budgeted the spend, right? I used to think, well, wait a minute, why would we spend so much on space? And if I'm not wrong, NASA's budget has been cut back almost like every year for quite a bit, right? So
just recently had a big boost from Biden, massive boost, just recently.
How much?
I'd have to look for it. I put it in. It was
at least $20.
At least $40. Okay. So I mean, I think the great thing about space exploration is there's spin-off benefits, because there's a lot of scientific innovation, developments, inventions, practical applications in day-to-day life that actually come out of people thinking about, how do we send people into space? How do we do this? How do we figure that out? And then the applications go far beyond just what we see there. So there's spin-off benefits.
Went up 3%. Congress's appropriation for the fiscal year 2022 increased NASA's annual budget by 3% to about $24 billion.
Yeah,
got it.
So actually, $24 billion is not that much, really.
No, it's not. So look at this.
Yep.
NASA's annual budget was $24 billion. That's for everything NASA does for the whole year.
Yep.
They just approved a $40 billion aid package that will be like in a matter of days. It will be spent in a month. So
we got to look at the total defense, because that's just NASA's funding, right? There's also Space Force. Does that even still exist?
I thought that was a TV show.
No, that was G-Force.
Oh,
Battle of the Planets.
So the total national defense budget in 2022
that's completely different.
782 billion, but there's all overlaps. And like you were saying, like the research they do in one gets handed over to the other. So a lot of the government spending on research in defense, as well as aerospace and space, the learnings then get developed within the commercial sector. So
100%. And I had heard that $40 billion aid, which is just, believe me, the latest but not the last cash infusion that will go to this, supporting the fighting. It's funny no one's talking about peace talks and negotiation, but everything is about escalation and more troops and more weapons. I find that quite interesting. Like that's the way it's supposed to.
There's been a lot of efforts at peace talks, but it's Putin's just not coming to the table.
I haven't heard.
It's been pretty consistent, and just no.
All the peace talks have been led by women's teams, and we just haven't got coverage.
Now, it's all been happening in Turkey. So what's his name?
Yep.
Erdogan. He's been sort of leading in that. But yeah, Putin's just saying that I'm not interested.
Well, there's more money in war.
Always. And if
I
you want to
don't
get
think there is
the world
more
out of
money in war.
recession, but if you want to get a world out of recession, you always go to war. It's always the way it's worked, you know. So you get the defense industry working, jobs, money spent, that community, everyone benefits, and it's you look, go back through history, look at the major.
And then you reduce your
recessions or
population,
wars.
so there's more for everyone.
Well, it depends, because war's not so much. The population reduction happens in the other places now versus in your own country, unless you're a country like Iraq or Afghanistan, right? So. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, look, if we want to talk about Afghanistan, so there's a 20-year war in Afghanistan that was never won. And from what I've heard, it was not one that wanted to be won. The world is full of these perpetual conflicts and perpetual wars that are not intended to be won. They're intended to be happening, and money consistently being spent and going to defense contractors. That's just how the script, the playbook goes out. And it's very sad. And some conflicts happen and some don't. Some places we need to be and some places get completely ignored. There's a lot of conflicts in the world. I was just talking about this with my family a couple of weeks ago. There are so many places in the world right now that have so much conflict and thousands of deaths happening, but we don't hear about them. They're not newsworthy. And that's really sad. And no one's going to help them, but we go and help some people, but not others. It's unsettling.
Let's move on to baby formula, right? So I'm sure.
By the way, there's 27 live conflicts right now. 27 live conflicts right now. Let's go to baby formula.
Does that include like resurgent sort of activity or just full scale war? Because it's
got Ukraine. We've got
Biden just decided to go back into Somalia after Trump took them out.
Right.
There we've got Ukraine, Afghanistan, Lebanon, Yemen, Rohingya crisis in Myanmar, and the conflict in Ethiopia at the moment too. Yeah. And others. So
there's a lot that's going on. Like we've talked about it over the weeks, you know, countries that were peaceful, but now because of food famine, you know, just energy shortages, and it's not because of the Ukraine war. It started before the Ukraine war, and we talked about some of them last year, but the world's in a pretty shaky place. Okay, so let's talk about baby formula. So
let's talk about bringing more people into the world.
But this is a huge story in the US right now. So basically, Abbott Nutrition, which is part of Abbott Laboratories.
No relation to me, I must say.
Yeah, well, one of the.
I'm a distant cousin.
Baby formula companies in the world. I was once asked if I'd be interested in pitching for some business work for them, and I can't work for companies that do baby formula especially if they were involved in the 70s and 80s, where they completely brainwashed women in the developed world to move from and to have shame about breastfeeding and to move to formula feeding, because it's been incredibly destructive for women. And I'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. But today Biden got some, there's a rule where it's like the Defense Act or something, and they go out and they do industrial scale sort of production. So anyway, he went out today, and I think that's been approved with their majority, but 100% of the Republicans voted against it, which is like, oh, pro-life, but let's not give the mums formula. So look, it looks like it's going to be sorted out soon. Abbott's looking for approval, and it all started when they took their milk off the shelves because a couple of babies died because of a bacterial infection. So a couple of issues that come up for me in this whole story that add to what we've been talking about. First of all, at the beginning of the pandemic, we just saw how fragile our world is, right? You know, where we get stuff made, where we get stuff from. And we understood that where the world's being held to ransom, you know, China makes this bit, India makes this bit. And if, you know, we get into a situation where everybody needs those bits, it's a problem. And here we are again and again and again. The world's sitting there struggling with, you know, how to solve a problem. But the other side of the baby formula thing that really, really upsets me is, so when our community was working really, really hard to raise money to buy food for people because they were starving, because of the economic crisis that was created in the back of the pandemic. And people were, it was so hard being around such suffering, I have to tell you. But one of the things I was constantly getting was requests for baby formula. And I was going out and I was talking to these ladies, and, you know, the kids are 5, 6, 7 months old. So the conversation about breastfeeding is already gone, right? So that's also been happening in the media. If you haven't started, you're not going to be able to do it. But when we're trying to feed so many people, the last thing we could do is to get formula, and because it's so expensive. And if you can buy lots and lots of rice for people, that's going to take care of more people, right? So it was very hard, right? Especially as a mum myself. And so what the women were doing is they're boiling rice and they're using the water from that to feed their babies. So rice is full of arsenic, but the water that you boil it in is really like high levels of arsenic. So basically, all of these children around Asia, in developed countries, poor countries that have been suffering, have been basically being poisoned, and nobody was paying. And I published a blog on it. Nobody, probably the least reads I've ever had on a blog. But, you know, so America's got all this attention for the mothers, which they should, because it's a very difficult thing. But all over the world, there are women who cannot afford, and 40% minimum of their income goes towards buying formula when they're earning income and can afford to buy it. So, you know, to me, it's been a real, and I haven't sort of shared on social media about it, but it's been a real case of the global hypocrisy. So women in wealthy countries, families in wealthy countries are suffering. Media loves it, all over it. Women in poor countries are really, really suffering. No one gives a crap. And it pisses me off. It really pisses me off how we just don't seem to see that. Anyway, so I'll hand it over to you guys.
Well, look, Andrea, what you're saying with the baby formula issue is what I've been talking about with, you know, military interventions around the world. I mean, there's some people that are worthy of notice and help, and some that aren't. So there's double standards and hypocrisies, no matter what the issue is, and that's sad. I mean, I'm pretty far removed from the baby formula topic now that I've got, you know, an 8 and a 6-year-old kid. But, you know, we used formula, right? We used formula, you know, early days. I mean, not every mother.
I still use formula.
Not every mother can or wants to breastfeed.
Absolutely.
So that there are options available to mothers to nurse their kids the way they choose to nurse their kids, I think is important. You know, I haven't been following this issue, you know, too closely, but I mean, you know, shortages happen. I mean, there are shortages of a lot of things around the world right now. I mean, supply chain issues and all this kind of stuff. So, I don't know. I mean, if babies are going hungry, I mean, are there other alternatives to formula? I don't know.
Yeah.
The
problem is, sorry.
Well, the challenge for this one is in the headline. The headline is America's running out of baby formula because 3 companies control the market and babies aren't that profitable. Now, I don't quite agree with the babies aren't that profitable because it's a massive market.
Oh, come on. We spent so much money on formula. It's not even funny. It's incredibly expensive.
Yeah, they're very expensive.
It's a massive cash grab. It's a massive cash grab that really, you know, preys on young parents, first-time parents' insecurities about taking care of your kids and doing the right thing. I know
we were very careful with ours. What we did was we always gave them a little mirror. We put a small line of formula there, and they used dollar notes to get it in. So we were okay.
That's how it starts.
You're terrible, Joe. All right, another.
The one thing that we have as a human race, and it's not a human race, the whole mammalian sector, right, is that we can actually use each other's milk, and this is the one thing that we don't seem to do enough of. So the whole idea for me, formula was just crazy. As in, like, we grew up. I mean, I grew up on just powdered milk. And didn't grow any horns, right? But you know, some would say maybe I haven't fully formed, but I didn't have formula when I was growing up. Turned out pretty okay. The whole idea that you would buy, you know, the cans are this small and it's $50, right?
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
It struck me a few years ago when I saw that someone had, you know, like you know, what you do is there's shoplifting, right? And when you hear people are shoplifting baby formula, and not because they need it, but for profit, then you know something really bad's going on, right? Because I mean, it is very profitable to shoplift something that can be sold like that. $50 like that. If you're in a supermarket, that's probably as much. It's gold in terms of. I mean, the brand is gold, but it's also gold. I mean, in terms of the price of something that size.
That's a good point.
I think the challenge on profitability there is that it's expensive for us, but the challenge on profitability is because of all the hurdles and hoops and regulations to make sure that it's all pure and pristine and everything else. You know, but I mean, anyone who's had more than one child or has been a sibling of more than one other knows that the first child gets the sort of, the golden glove pristine one. you drop the meat on the floor, it goes in the rubbish bin. The second child, you drop the meat on the floor and you give it a bit of a rinse and give it to them. The third child, you drop the meat on the floor, you just eat it. Yeah, it's fine, nothing wrong with it.
It's
Look, a lot of these things are just massive cash grabs. We see this with big pharma and all these kind of companies. And what's really sad is, and we've seen this, not to go down too far down a rabbit hole, but we've seen this in this whole COVID situation around vaccines and with treatments. And there are some drugs that are just immediately shamed and made to look like they're horse dewormer, when there's studies that actually show that they have greater efficiency in treating COVID than some of the mainstream, unsurprisingly, insanely expensive drugs, compared with some that are just pennies. So, a lot of it is sales. Look, Joe, you wanted to hear from a sales guy. A lot of this is just frickin' sales and marketing. And who's able to position themselves as the right choice, who's able to, slander and smear the competition, which is exactly what's been done with like ivermectin, for example. Even though I've seen study after study that actually shows that it's as effective as other treatments out there for COVID. Hey, Facebook, don't cancel this show because I said that or put a label on there. But I'm just
Tom's opinion
that I've seen, right?
To the rest of the people on the show. Just saying.
Some things are accepted as fact and true. When we talk about disinformation and we talk about fake news, it happens. It's not a mega specific problem.
But the baby formula market is the one that is like, if you're interested, go and have a look at it. And it goes back well into the 70s and the 80s. And those companies, and probably the profitability comment is actually also around, there's so much legislation around how they do what they do now.
That's it.
Because of this history. But they did the damage. I mean, the Philippines went from 80% of the kids were breastfed to 80% of the kids were on formula. The garment factory workers in Cambodia are paying 40% of their salaries towards formula. And they're earning $180 a week.
But why is that? So maybe I don't know enough about it. Why is that?
The marketing of Nestle and those sort of companies, they basically
but it still comes down to consumer choice, right? I mean,
no. They changed the cultural acceptance of breastfeeding, so it became a shameful thing to do, and that's what they did. And it was so. Go and have a look at it. It's one of the most
bizarre, because I had always heard the opposite. I mean, I'm from a generation where women seem to be shamed for not breastfeeding and for doing the unnatural thing. So this is news to me.
To me, that's a different topic for me, because yes, that is definitely happening, and it's definitely part of raising kids. And I saw those people in action, shaming people for not breastfeeding, and I believe you should do whatever the hell you want. But this is a different thing. This was actually, they changed the culture again, and to be against breastfeeding and shameful in traditional conservative societies all around the world. And then as soon as COVID hit and these women couldn't afford to pay it, those companies have been nowhere to support them. So it's a really interesting, it's a lot more interesting than I think people give it credit. Should we move on to the next story?
Yeah.
All right. So we've got the Buffalo shooting, which is obviously something that started the week. 10 people innocently doing their Saturday shopping at a supermarket, gunned down by he's being called a terrorist by some, but not by everybody. I'm actually at the point where I really struggle with having even an emotional response to these stories, because even though I'm devastated for the people who died and for their families and for the people who are affected, there's an obvious solution to the problem that we just don't see sort of happening. So it's I don't know, do you guys feel the same? These mass shootings?
Yeah, look,
why.
I mean, look, there is I've seen stats that say that there's a mass shooting, and a mass shooting is defined as, I think, more than 3 or 4 people killed. Okay. There's like a mass shooting happening in the US every day.
Yeah.
Every day there's something happening. Now, maybe not 10 people in a store, but there's some sort of a mass shooting happening every single day statistically in the US. And I don't know, I'm becoming desensitized to it.
Yeah.
I mean, the answer seems to be fairly obvious. You look at New Zealand, and when they had something happen, Jacinda Ardern, in a heartbeat, got everybody on both sides of the aisle to start looking at gun control. But you get these folks in the U.S. that I feel misinterpret the Second Amendment. They talk about the right to bear arms, but they actually don't get the context, which is to protect them, to have an armed militia to protect themselves against a tyrannical government. And the context of that was basically if the Brits come back. That was my understanding. If the Brits come back, you as Americans have the right to bear arms against them. But you ask, I mean, most Americans perhaps are not historians and are not reading the Second Amendment, but they feel like I've got the right to have an AK-47 to protect myself. It's ludicrous, right? So it doesn't make any sense. So you've got this gun culture in the US, and that's what happens when people have access to guns. And well, guns don't kill, people kill. Well, let's not play word games, everybody. Like, let's just keep it real.
But you remember I brought this up. I brought this up some time ago as well, right? Because it was a revelation to me when I found out about this. Canada has more guns per capita than the U.S. But when you talked about culture, that was actually quite interesting, because I think that's where the difference.
I would like
is.
to see that, because that surprises. Oh, more guns per capita.
Per capita.
Yeah.
Okay, that still surprises me. But I'll tell you, in Canada, we've got
less capitas. Then
in Canada, we've got very tight gun legislation, so that does surprise me. But I will say that guns in Canada would be like hunting rifles for some dude in the Yukon, and that's very different from having a gun culture and people walking
anyone
around
can get one
with firearms, and they can buy them anywhere. That's not the case in Canada. It's not that easy. So it's just night and day. It's very different.
Yeah.
If you're a farmer of chickens, there's a good chance that you're going to be eating a lot of chickens for your evening meals. And if you're a country that's one of their number one exports is military weapons, then it's fair enough that all their people have them. I mean, it's but it's stupid. It's
Tim,
stupid.
it's, to use the chicken metaphor, it is like a chicken and egg thing, right? So look, Elaine and I have talked about this before. If we ever move to the US, okay, I hate guns. So I'm going to sound like a big hypocrite. If we ever move to the US, I would feel like we would need a firearm somewhere in the house that I could access in case there was a frickin' intruder.
Because he's got a gun.
He's got a gun.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now that just perpetuates this whole cycle, right? So what do we do when normal semi-sane people like me who hate guns now feel like they might need one to protect themselves? But it's hypocritical, because in fact, I think studies have shown that most people, they get killed by their own gun, or it's someone in the house that gets killed by the gun. So it's not even that intruder. Like, it's not even that.
Yep.
And it's often suicide with the gun.
Yep.
So
and there's often
massive problems that need to be solved at a fundamental level.
Yeah, and it's not every state in the US. So my husband and I have had the same chat. If we ever move to the US, we're going to get a gun. I'm like, no, we'll just live in a state where they don't have them. And there's plenty of those states. So you don't actually have to make that decision if you move to the US. Just, you go to somewhere like Massachusetts where it's not a gun culture because people just don't have them. But there's another story to this, and it's just not just the mass shooting. Of course, it's the reason behind it. And basically, this piece in the Daily Beast called "Republicans Must Answer for great replacement theory violence. And they're saying Republicans and the conservative media ecosystem have to answer for the blood on their hands. And of course, we're seeing a lot of people skipping around this story, especially in this media. But the great replacement theory is at the center of this. And this is basically, obviously, white people are feeling scared that we're not going to be the dominant race anymore. And God, as a white person, it's so pathetic. But so people who believe in this believe that, you know, everyone's coming to take over and there's going to be more of them. And they believe that the Jews are the head of a nefarious international cabal who are deliberately using blacks, Muslims, immigrants of color, feminists, and LGBTQ to infiltrate, weaken, and eventually replace Western civilization, which is a euphemism for white people. As a white person, it just makes I just feel it's just pathetic. But
so who's using them? Who's using all these people?
I don't know. That's what the GOP and the media, conservative media, are saying, right? That's what the
the
replacement theory. Yeah, and of course, then there's the whole Tucker Carlson angle, who's gone very, very quiet, and there's a proof that he sort of mentioned it 400 times on his shows. So it's a bigger thing sort of that's going on rather than just the shooting and gun control. It's also, there's this narrative in the right that is sort of creating fear in people. And it's turning these young men into these terrorists who are just going out and killing grandmas doing their Saturday shopping because they have black skin.
So, for me, I try to avoid left versus right talk. I feel like left and right talk is actually a big part of the problem. I agree.
I'm just talking about this is what the media is reporting. So I do agree. But
it's left media. You know what I'm saying? So it's not the media. It's so look, you and I could find the same issue and then find two very different sources that would give a very different take on that. And that's the sad thing, because it's not a different perspective, which is healthy. It's a different political view and a different political agenda for media. And that's what's really sad. And the left and the right do it the same way. So while in the same hand, you might have the right going, this replacement theory or whatever this is. Same time, the left was all over that kid, Kyle Rittenhouse. So Kyle Rittenhouse, this 18-year-old that shot and killed 3 people at this Black Lives Matter event.
And then walked away. Yeah.
Yeah, the 3 people that he killed were white.
But he still turned up and murdered people.
No, he didn't. It was self-defense. I actually saw the video.
Yeah?
Yeah. He actually was helping people at that event and got chased by these white guys with guns, and he defended himself, and that's why he was acquitted. But the media narrative got people thinking it was this white supremacist guy that went across state to shoot up black people at a Black Lives Matter event. So this type of misinformation happens on both sides. So that's why I hesitate to. That's a big deal, because you want to know something? When Kyle Rittenhouse got acquitted, I saw footage of so many African Americans, so many black people that were so upset that he got acquitted because they thought that he killed black people. It's horrible. And that was the narrative. And a lot of people don't know the facts of the case. So anyway, that notwithstanding, look, to me, crazy people are crazy people. I don't care what their ideology is. Yes. Are there people in the US that do believe that, are there white supremacists? Yeah, of course there are. Are there racist people in the US? Yeah, of course they are. That's a problem. But look, the US has always had racial tension. They've always had racial tension. So you've got racial tension. You add to the mix people that like to stir the pot and get people to look outward instead of inward, right? So to me, when we talk about them, it's so convenient for the powers that be, the establishment, the status quo, to get blacks to hate whites and whites to hate blacks. Mm-hmm. That's just it's so easy, isn't it? For left to hate right and right to hate left. But when you think about it, what has the left actually done for most Americans today? What's Biden doing for people? right? Obama, what did he do for Black Americans? Not a whole lot. In fact, he incarcerated more people than Bush did before. And in fact, he started more wars than Bush did before. So when we start thinking about, oh, Democrats are for the people, they're not. They're not doing anything for the people that they could be doing. I see them both as like corporatists. Both the left and the right are just corporatists. They accept money from corporate donors, and that's who they're responsible for. When you look at, there was this force the vote movement in the States a few months ago, where Nancy Pelosi, there was a chance that she may not become speaker. She had to get enough votes from the Democratic Party. So there was a movement started by some people on the left, true progressives, to try to encourage the Democrats to force her, as a condition of voting for her, a condition to have universal health care at least put to a vote. At least put to a vote so that you could see who supports it and who doesn't. She never wanted that to happen, but the so-called squad, which I like to call the fraud squad, with AOC and a whole bunch of other people that people love. Whoa, she's so progressive. They never once got behind the force the vote thing to actually force Nancy Pelosi to put this vote, to put it to a vote. So anytime they have leverage, they don't do anything. And that's the scary thing, because they're all on the same side. So to bring it full circle, look, yes, another mass shooting. Yes, there's more racism, or there's still racism. Yes, because of the access to guns, when there's conflict in the US, it becomes deadly and massive. So the US has tons of problems they've got to sort out. And they've got to, for me, big picture, get money out of politics. This is one of the things that I loved about Bernie Sanders, at least. Now, he hasn't done everything that he should, but at the very least, Bernie Sanders, his average donation for his campaign was like $40. And it was from just average Americans. He would not take money from corporate donors. So that tells you who he's accountable to. If you made politicians wear stickers and logos like NASCAR and F1 drivers do,
that'd be hilarious.
Who really funds them, then you'd really see who they're working for. So there's just a lot of things that need to change in order for things to happen. I think I've talked about this maybe with you, Andrea, when we talk about the environment, environmental issues. None of that's going to happen as long as there's money in politics and these big oil companies having influence over policy. It'll never happen. And they have to be pulled kicking and screaming, or you've got to, there has to be a financial incentive. If things could change overnight, and what we need leadership that's not accountable to corporate donors to actually put their foot down and go, you know what? Within 3 years, no combustible engines anymore. Because the technology is there, they can make it happen. So if there's a will, there's a way. We just have to get things out of our way.
Yeah, I mean, look, totally listening, hearing what you're saying. I don't necessarily agree. Like when you look at the left versus right thing, which I agree that the language is divisive just in its own right. But I think politically the US and most democracies around the world have been basically handicapped for years now because there's no majority anywhere. Like I'm hoping in Australia, there's an election coming up tomorrow. I'm hoping.
But there can't be a majority in the US. So the US, by having a two-party system by definition, and they both care about politics, not people, you'll always have half the people that are left and half that are right.
Yeah.
Now,
but
Canada is different. To Canada's credit, we actually have 3 or 4 legitimate parties that consistently have a chance of winning, whether it's the Liberals, the Conservatives, the NDP, you've got the Bloc Québécois, and you've got the Greens. And the Greens are fairly powerful. So you've got 5 parties there. No one's afraid of oh, that's a wasted vote. But in the US, sadly, you vote Green, people play politics on you and say, but Andrew, that's a wasted vote. You better vote Democrat. So they try to brainwash you and say, what are you going to do? Vote for Trump? You're going to vote Republican? You've got to vote blue. So guess what? Blue never has to work for your vote, ever. They never have to honor any promises because they play the boogeyman and they go, I'm your lesser of two evils. So we need to get to a point where people actually vote their frickin' conscience and vote what's right, not play some political game in the short term, and actually get real, strong third-party alternatives out there that will hold people to account. Can you imagine if you actually told Biden and all of the Democrats, hey, dude, we're not going to vote for you. We're going to vote for green.
And look,
They'd shit their pants.
we are on the cusp of revolution from a democratic voting perspective, right? So, and I think Australia tomorrow will be potentially the first sign of it really happening in the world, because it's a two-party system, just like the UK, right? The Greens are going to get a lot more seats than they've ever had, but it's the independents in Australia that are going to be the decision makers, and they will align with the party. And apparently the majority of these independents are females, professionals, and you know, like you think for the Morrison government, who's been basically abusing females, not taking some of the issues seriously. So I don't know, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens tomorrow, but we need to keep ticking things along. But there's one article that I really want to recommend. It's in The Shot, and you might think, well, it's going to be, you know, just a bit of a joke, but it's a good one. I watched all of Sky After Dark's election coverage and have some fucking concerns. So this is a journalist talking about what's going on.
That's the name of the article.
And that's the name of the article. So it gave me an opportunity to obviously say, use the F word. But let's go past Twitter and Musk. I do want to quickly mention COVID and monkeypox, which is obviously the new thing. So in Korea, they estimate that 2 million people are suspected to have COVID. 740,000 are in quarantine. They basically have no equipment. They can't test. They can't do anything. So, but they think that maybe 7% of the population is going to be impacted with COVID, and they think it's just going to be a complete disaster. But the other story that's been breaking this week is about monkeypox, which is a virus that comes out of Africa. And the reason they're concerned is because they've never seen it spread the way it's spreading. So it was first seen 23 in Spain, and now it's in Britain, Italy, Portugal, and Sweden. Australia's just reported its first. America's got some. So they believe that it mostly spreads in young men. It's not a good thing for children. It's closely aligned to smallpox. And if you've had a smallpox treatment or injection or whatever it is, I can't even remember what smallpox was, you should be okay. But 1 in 10 people can die. And we're at the beginning of this, and it's exactly where I'm planning to take the boys in July. So hopefully it's not something that takes off. So that's what's going on with that.
I mean, it's scary. I mean, look, I really hope that we take a good look at how we globally handled COVID the last 2 years. Some countries handled it well and some less so. Anybody who thinks that COVID was the last big global pandemic we're going to face is a fool. I was telling people for the last 2 years, like the next pandemic's just around the corner. Like, of course. Things mutate, there are new things. So like we need to look at how we handle this and start, how do we prevent such things? How do we identify things a little bit earlier? What measures do we put into place? What measures do we not put into place? Do we have an over-reliance on vaccines? Or do we look at other things as well in terms of, sharing some health information and prevention and cures. So there's a lot of things that I think we could learn from this current situation that I hope we can put into place with monkeypox, because we're always going to be dealing with this. And all of the four of us here, we're pretty young, 40s, 50s, I imagine. But look, I just thought to myself the other day, my gosh, when I'm 70 and 80, I'm going to have a very different point of view around what these things are like. I got COVID in November, I think, of last year, and I barely knew I had it. I'm young, I'm fit, I'm healthy, strong, active. Barely knew I had it. The only reason why I knew I had it was because we had to test our kids before they went to school one day, and I was testing the test to make sure I knew how to administer the test. And then it told me that I was freaking positive. I'm like, oh shit. So now I was in quarantine. I'm like, God damn it. So that's the only reason why, the only way that I knew. But you know what? Fast forward 40 years. 40, I'll be 90. Okay. But anyway, fast forward 30 years or so, getting any kind of a disease like that could be a very different scenario. So I really hope we get really good at figuring out how to handle these things so that those that are greatly at risk are taken care of, and those that are not are allowed to go about and live their lives. And that's both neither of those two things happen, I think, as well as they should have.
There's some noise and chatter happening that is probably going to get noisier, and that's with regards to the WHO wanting countries to sign up to a global mandate of how to address future pandemics and health crises, where the WHO will have some sort of controls as to how the globe responds. So in one sense, that sounds like a good idea. It sounds like a good idea that it's not all going to be, stuck. All the vaccines aren't going to be produced in one country and exported to the world, especially first to the world that pays for it, and then maybe to the others at some point when we think that, we should. But so from that perspective, the WHO having those sorts of powers or control could be really good. But the chatter is against freedoms and giving the WHO global power over the sovereignty of a nation to deal with a medical crisis. And so that chatter is likely to get noisier. And that's a really interesting one. So when you say it would be great, if we can handle these things better, in a sense, it's to give authority to an organization who is geared to handle it for the planet rather than for a state or a country.
Yeah,
but
I mean, look,
the danger is absolute power corrupts.
Well, whether it's an organization or a collective, right? So, I mean, look, we could look at, for example, the United Nations. To me, the United Nations in its essence, I feel like they're not living up to it, but the United Nations at its core should be an organization that of nations that work together to try to come up with rules of engagement for how should we do things globally, so that you don't have people operating unilaterally, right? But you've got, and it's not like a one world government, but you do have a number of nations coming together to figure out, hey, how should we handle these types of situations? So if that's what the WHO scenario looks like, then I'm all for it. But what we can't have, if you just look at the U.S., my God, it's United States, but quite divided, where one state has one set of rules, another state has another set of rules. Don't get me started on abortion. It could be legal in one state and illegal in another. What? So as you fly over 4 states, you could be, what you want to do is legal here, but illegal there, and all that. To me, it's quite nonsensical. So we need to have some protocols, some standards that all nations at least have, whether it's binding or non-binding, but at least some sort of a checklist of like, hey, here's what we should do when we detect our first case. Mm-hmm. Right? Yep. And I'm not a smart guy, but it's sort of like, what's the SOP globally for when we detect something, right? And what do we do? These are things that can be figured out.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this is going to be we're going to have to do this, right? So monkeypox spreading across Europe and around the world is shocking scientists, which is why we're hearing about it, right? But basically, there's these people,
scientists. So what are we doing about it?
Exactly, right?
What are we doing about it just to stop the spread? Like, what are we doing? Like, I don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, and I think they're still in the stage of learning, right? So anytime that something new breaks out, they need time to understand it, and we've never been very good at giving them that time. But with climate change, what's happening is the migration of animals and nature is happening as we speak. And they've done these mathematical equations of all these new animals that have never crossed each other's paths, who will now be crossing each other's paths. So things like Ebola outbreaks could be a thing in our future. And it's not a long time away. It's soon, right? So like the World Health Organization saying we need a global strategy. We sure do need a global strategy, especially if Ebola gets out, right? So, and I know a lot of people are, we're going to be a one world government and all that sort of stuff. But if we don't get our heads around the fact that we've got to work together as a global society to overcome all of the challenges that we face, then we're not going to overcome any of them. But look, we're not going to have time to go through global politics.
Can I just say, Andrea, you're 100% right. And when people talk about this one world government, there's always a negative connotation to it, right?
Yep.
I mean, you could say it as diabolically as you want, like you one world government, right? Or you could say, oh, one world where we come together and, we have global problems. Let's figure it out globally, right? So it just depends how you frame it and how you say it. But look, you're right. We have one globe, and there's nothing that happens here that doesn't affect what frickin' happens there.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way it is. And we see that environmentally, we see that economically, militarily, I mean, all these things. So we need to try to come together and figure stuff out for the betterment of the earth. My gosh, I mean, there's this kind of metaphor of if bringing it full circle, one of those UFOs lands on the lawn of the Kremlin or, here in Singapore or Parliament Hill in Ottawa or the White House in Washington, take me to your leader, and they want to do something, are we going to come together? Like, what are we going to do? I sure hope sometimes something happens where we find, and maybe, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's climate change, but we need something. And I was hoping maybe it's COVID. Like, we need something that gets everybody to go, holy smokes, what's happening now is happening to all of us. And we're all humans, and we all have the same issues. We're all one people.
Yep.
It's almost like what NATO, an attack on one is attack on all. Mm-hmm. We need to have that philosophy across the board.
Yeah. Look, we're not going to get a chance to go through the sort of political stuff. But in my weekend reads, I really want to recommend. There's a lot of articles about like what's happening in Sri Lanka, but also what's happening in the Horn of Africa, Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco. I mean, we've got a lot of countries on the cusp of starvation. So therefore, social unrest is really happening. So we're going to see a lot going on. Yemen, which is already in a messy, terrible situation. Ethiopia, South Sudan, Syria. There's some big stuff coming up for the world. So I just really want to encourage everyone to pay attention to it. And but Joe, just before we move on to the sales conversation, do you want to just give us a quick update on what you're seeing on the global economy and what's happened in the last week since the big crypto crash the week before?
The quick summary, it's all going down. That's it.
I'm reading Apocalypse and.
Well, I told you about how last week, I said all the rich people, everybody's got the real money in there. They basically are holding cash right now because that's the move to make. And just people who thought that last week was as low as Apple could go, found out that, oh, no, we can go down still a bit more. There is definitely a move away from things. I saw an interview on Bloomberg where one of these very, very stately old investors, who's been around and seen markets go up and down. He's preparing for the worst bear market he's ever seen in his life, right? So I think there's enough. There's enough sort of fear in the market. The technicals are certainly in place where all the lows have been tested, and if we break past them, and then they have been broken on a number of occasions, we're going to have a massive. It's not a case of whether Apple suddenly becomes less valuable or Amazon becomes less valuable. It's a case of Tim pressing too many buttons while I'm talking, and also, of course,
that wasn't me.
Yeah. So no, it's a simple thing, right? I mean, the market's going to move the way the market does, and if you are trading professionally or you have money in the markets, you have to do the responsible thing for your money. Risk management says if everything is going down and you're holding something, you should sell it, because that's the way to sort of to minimize your risk. The world is de-risking itself. Tech stocks have taken the lead because tech is usually the more risky of the sectors. But it also, of course, having a much broader effect because so much of the broader market is tech. Everything is heading in that direction. So you have tech leading the way, and you have then, of course, Bitcoin, which is and all the crypto sort of being related to tech as well. I shared the curves, privately as well. That if you correlate the curves of Apple to Amazon to Bitcoin, you see a very, very similar curve in terms of where things are going. And actually, interestingly, now it's almost like Bitcoin's resisting the downward trend a little bit. So it's an interesting conversation. Gold finally is sort of showing itself, to be moving up a little bit. So maybe that could be the sign now of people running for safety. But until just about, I think, 2 days ago, gold wasn't going in the direction you'd expect it to go, and people are fearful as well. So, I think the dollar was still the king. And then now suddenly there's a consensus that says, okay, it's time to go to gold, and gold has popped up, just in the past day.
Right. And bonds as well, right? Bonds are down. I'm not going to use the right words, but as a safe investment, they're not good, right?
Well, bonds have actually been not been in fashion for quite a long time, mostly because of returns being as slow as they are, and because of the way value of money is dropping, right? So I can have a bond that is a strong investment, usually where you'll get your return of 3-4%. But if your inflation is outpacing that, then you're gonna go, nope. Why would I do that, right? So. The opportunity right now, or the way people can hold on to the things, is to hold on to tangible things. Like I said, gold's finally moving sort of in the upper direction, and that might be where the movement will go to now. Because when the market has to decide something, it's going to look for the best choice that it can do. And right now, if you look at equities, it's not a good time to do that. If you're risk averse, you're not going to go and try and catch all these falling stocks. If you're risk averse, you're going to look for what's going up. And currently, there's a bit of consensus around gold. So I think the money's going to go in there, and that's going to I think it will fulfill, as in like it then will lead to gold going even more.
And guns, buy guns.
Yeah. Oh yeah. By the way, not want to perpetuate things that are wrong. I did a fact check on myself. In the U.S., if you talk about registered firearms versus registered firearms in Canada, the number I said earlier was correct. They're more registered per capita. But when I factor in the unregistered numbers, it's just a whole different game. So I apologize for somewhat misleading you. There are 1 million.
Unregistered numbers. Is there an unregistered registry?
Well, because there's a manufacturing.
They do a poll at the election booth.
Well, you have numbers that are sold, numbers of guns made. Most of the guns in the U.S. are made in the U.S. You have those guns produced, and they're all by public companies, so you know how many guns have been made and sold. So in the U.S. you have slightly over 1 million registered firearms, and 392 million, beg your pardon, unregistered firearms, and that really just throws the numbers around. Sorry about that.
Wow. Well, that's fair enough, because if the registered one doesn't work, you need another 390 in your cupboard to make sure that something at least works.
Well, and here's the big distinction, right? So, and again, I'm not a gun aficionado, so I can't really say, but I would imagine that the firearms that these Canadians have are like hunting rifles, which is very different from like these AK-47s that people are walking into churches of all places and shooting people up. So it's like, you can have the right to defend yourself, but not the right to destroy a small army. Like, is that what we're talking about? And that's pretty much the type of firearms that are, free and easy in the US, right? I don't get it. And the minute anybody pushes back a little bit, and God forbid says you got to do background checks before you buy a gun, people flip out and lose their marbles and say you're infringing on my rights.
Obama tried to. He was furious when Congress wouldn't do it, because they're funded by NSA, and that's not the Speakers Association.
Yeah, but the NRA has been bankrupt for a couple of years, and they've lost their power, and they're moving south down into Texas because they were up in New York State, and they've had it. The people who are fighting against guns in America, they are Mums Against Guns, those sort of groups. I've got a friend who's part of Mums Against Guns. He's not a she, but it's brilliant what they're doing, and they are making headway, because it's just completely illogical. All right, Tom, let's hand it over to you. The current state of sales.
Oh,
so
wow.
you said you dropped your note.
How much time do I have?
11 minutes.
Yeah,
perfect.
How the pandemic changed everything and changed nothing when it comes to sales. So What does that mean?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, so one of my signature talks that companies are inviting me to speak on is like the state of sales, and what are the trends that are happening now that's kind of shaping the future of sales. And there are 7, but I think in the time that we've got, I'll probably just touch on one, and just unpack that a little bit. I mean, I think the biggest trend that's shaping the future of sales right now is that virtual selling is good for sellers, but it's even better for buyers. So that's something that a lot of salespeople are really struggling with, that virtual selling is not just good for them. They should be good at selling virtually, but it's even better for buyers. So what does this mean? Well, their buyers actually want this now more than ever. In fact, 63% of buyers say that working remotely has made the purchasing process easier. So that's interesting. So buyers like to work from home. They like to work remotely, and they're actually finding it a lot easier to buy things. Now, that could be a few factors. It could be, fewer face-to-face meetings. It's easier for them to meet with multiple vendors. They can get information sent to them by email or, on social a lot easier than before. They can have more conversations on social as opposed to face-to-face. But whatever those factors are, they're just finding it a whole lot easier buying remotely. So look, if your customers find it easy to buy remotely, then we've got to get with the program and get really good at selling remotely, because virtual selling is the norm, right? So we've been doing virtual selling here at Soco for years. Even in Singapore with some of our prospects that would be in the CBD in downtown Singapore. Hey, should we meet up to talk about a training program? Sure, let me drop you a Zoom link. So we would try that first as the default. So we were always like Zoom is the default, because my gosh, even a small place like Singapore, it takes a freaking hour to get somewhere, park your car, you have your 30-minute meeting, and then you go back again, and you can't back-to-back your meetings, right? So I like to save the face-to-face when it really matters, but if it's just an initial discovery call or qualification, you can do that over Zoom. And if you're good on camera, you can be just as compelling, as effective, as engaging. You could build rapport just as easily virtually as you can. And in fact, you're respecting your customer's time, because you can keep that meeting to 15 minutes or 20 minutes, and then they can hop on to something else. They don't have to worry about hosting you and, oh, welcome, can I get you a coffee or a water or all that stuff. Now, look, I had a face-to-face meeting with a prospect earlier this week, and it felt pretty nice. But I tell you something, it felt nice because it was novel, but it was like, oh shit, they're out in Changi and we stay out here in Jurong. So it's going to take me 45 plus minutes to get there. And then, you want to make sure that you're looking good. And like, you got to have pants on, you know what I mean? All that kind of stuff.
We'll have to make him stand up.
Yeah.
Can I ask you? No. I was
okay. Right. So anyway,
traditional industries like financial services, like the big old property companies, the ones that own the cities. A lot of times over the years that I've talked to them, they're very reluctant to move towards that sort of way of being, because it's relationships, it's hanging out at the gentleman's club, that sort of tradition, right? Have you seen a lot of those sort of people who've been forced into this situation? Have they been able to flourish, or are they just floundering?
No, well, it depends, and it's about your mindset. Are you open to it or not? So I'm glad you raised that, because in fact, one of our, how do we do this? At the start of the pandemic, about let's say February of 2020, okay, when the shit absolutely hit the fan, February 2020. I told my team, hey, everybody, we're going to find a way to get through this. Don't you worry about it. Fake it till you make it. I don't know. But we're going to find a way out. What I want you to do is I want us to email all of our past customers and just let them know, hey, we're here. It's probably a really tough time for you. If there's anything you need, just let us know. We're happy to help. Yeah. Just leading with empathy. All of a sudden, we start getting emails back from our customers. One of them was Hutton's, right? So Hutton's emails, and they're like, hey, how much do you charge for workshops? I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. We're back, right? So I closed a deal. We did 10 sessions with them with like, I think like 600 agents or something. And this was like the start of the pandemic. And it was all about social selling. And the book is based, it's 10 essential strategies to prospect, position, and present using social media, digital media. There's 10 strategies. We did 10 sessions. There were like hundreds of people on each one. And this was like in March, I think, of 2020. So they were open to it and they loved it and they wanted to learn. And what I started then seeing in the newspaper was I started seeing some agents, and some were from Hutton's, that were getting really good at doing virtual tours and virtual showing of flats because they couldn't meet face to face. They couldn't do it, but they got really good at, you know, whether it's drones and like, you know, photos and video and sharing that with prospects first. And I had some agents that were closing deals on properties sight unseen. Now, guess what, everybody? This is not a new concept. So remember when I said that it changed everything and changed nothing? So it changed nothing because if you've ever purchased real estate overseas, quite often, look, we own property in Malaysia, and a lot of the owners there, I mean, fortunately, we're half an hour away. We could drive over and see it. But a lot of the people that bought property there, Korea, Japan, never once set foot. They just had an agent that maybe takes photos, video, share it with them, and they just look at the numbers. Does it make sense? So they've been doing this for years. So it's possible. You just have to sometimes remind people. And this is what coaching is all about, right? Training is teaching someone something new. Coaching is reminding them of maybe something that they already know that they did before that they maybe forgot or stopped doing. So it's like, hey, so I go, hey, have you ever sold a property sight unseen? Yeah, I've done that before. How'd you do it? Well, I did. Let's try it again. You know what I mean? So virtual selling is now the norm. The only difference now is it's not kind of like a during circuit breaker, it was not a nice to have, it was a need to have. You had to do it. You were either selling remotely and or delivering remotely. Look, all of us here, if you couldn't deliver your training programs or your keynotes virtually, you were out of business. So you had to be very quick to do your virtual speaker keynote reel and start letting the world know that you're equally comfortable on stage and on camera. And the sooner you could do that and let them know it's just as engaging, it's just as effective. You find the stats on retention for e-learning and all this kind of stuff, and you make your case, and the proof is in the pudding. You know what I mean? Like the proof is in the pudding. So we would always sell ourselves on a sales call as like, are you finding this engaging, right? Like, do you feel like I'm there? Well, this is how it's going to be with your team. You know what I mean? So it's just how you present yourself. So look, virtual selling is absolutely the norm because our buyers have gone remote. And in fact, 80% of buyers want to continue working remotely either half or more of the time in the future. So what we're seeing when I'm talking to bosses and leaders, their teams do not want to come back to work, or should I say the office. They don't want to come back. They want to keep working from home. So that's what's changed. That's one of the things that's changed. So if your team wants to work from home, they're going to be either buying remotely or selling remotely. So, you know, we've all got to get with the program and just realize that that's just the reality. So, I mean, people ask me, will working in the office like ever make a comeback? You know, like will it come back? Well, it will, but not to the extent that it was at before. Not to the extent that it was at before. And Elaine and I were talking about this earlier today. And we said, look, as long as our team is productive and they're happy working remotely, let them keep doing it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Only bring people back to the office for a specific intent or purpose. What's the reason for it? Are we having a brainstorming session where we need to collaborate and we're gonna do some whiteboarding and all that kind of stuff, and we want to have like a hackathon, or like what's the purpose for the gathering? But I tell you, people commuting for an hour each way, 2 hours out of their day, and getting all dressed up real nice just to sit at a freaking cubicle and be on Zoom calls, but at least you're supervising them in your office, those days are gone. Those days are gone.
I agree.
Yeah, I think, what's really interesting is that if they're productive at home, then you're not losing anything. In fact, you're gaining because you don't need to have as big a real estate footprint.
Oh,
And the amount of facilities that you would end up saving, or if you're planning to
100%.
grow your business, you don't need to add any more facilities. You can grow into the space you already have because
Yes.
people are telecommuting. It's just, it's amazing. It's
so Tim, you're right. So it's a mindset thing. So, maybe we've here at Soco, we've always been more progressive. How do I mean? We've always dealt with freelancers. We've always had people on our teams that were working remotely anyway. We've got Alice in the UK and Trista in Vancouver, and we've got Rachel in Hong Kong. So we've always had people working with us, part of our freaking team, working remotely. So that's always just been part of our culture. So again, when COVID hit, it was like, I guess it's just business as usual. The only difference is now the Singapore team works remotely, but we didn't have to learn how to work remotely. It was already part of our company culture. So as long as they're happy and they're productive, have at it. And look, we also did get lucky because we still have an office presence in Geelong at Vision Exchange. Vision Exchange, the two nice big black towers near GEM. So Vision Exchange, we're on level 24. So we used to have office space there where our team would work every single day. And then COVID hit. Our lease expired, and then we couldn't even go in the office. We weren't allowed to go to the office for like 4 months. We couldn't go, but we're still paying our rent there. That's not fun. But then fortunately, the lease expired, I think, in June of 2020. And then we just didn't renew.
That's lucky. That's lucky.
Yeah. Really lucky. Imagine if we signed a 3-year thing in January or something.
And they were still charging rent.
Those fuckers were still not only charging rent, but I don't know if you remember, they also got rebates from the Singapore government. The landlords got rebates.
And they didn't pass it on.
And they fucking didn't pass it on, and they still charged us full rent.
Wow.
It's because of that headline. The headline had the F-bomb in it. Now we got license
all gloves are off.
First time used on the show. No, it's amazing. So one of the things I wanted to ask you is about the concept of, obviously I understand it, selling with empathy. We sell, there's a lot of people out there who are not selling with empathy, and they're just jarring. They show up in your inbox and everywhere on social media, and it's just like, oh God, you're so ignorant. Go away. Leave me alone. I'll never buy from you. Talk about that.
Well, what specifically? Look, so
what does it mean? When you say selling with empathy?
What does it mean? So selling with empathy is actually starting with it's one of the things I talk about in my state of sales talk is around having a buyer first mindset. All right. So it's having a buyer first mindset, where most people, obviously, they have a seller first mindset, where it's just me. I want to hit my targets. Andrea is not a person. She's a number. Do you know what I mean? It's like you see them as a prospect first, where you need to see them as a person first. So there's this buyer first philosophy that people need to have, like active listening. Number one, that's the critical foundation, like active listening. Like, hey, well, what's going on in your world? What's happening?
Joe, that's active listening. Sorry,
right?
Okay. Continue.
Right. Active listening. Right. So that's number one. And look, when I say that this is, it's changed and it's the same, is we've always needed to have a buyer first philosophy.
Absolutely.
However, this crisis has made it even more so, that you can't just be like, hey, Andrea, how you doing? How am I doing? My husband lost his job. I'm here. I'm this, that. Like, someone's got COVID, and I don't know if I'm gonna like. You want to know how I'm doing? That's how I'm fucking doing, right? Yeah. So that's where empathy. I know. Well, now we're getting real, but that's where active listening and empathy really matters. Like, it matters because your customers are actually going through something right now. So you can't just knock on the door and say, I want to sell something. It's like, well, what's going on in your world? Like, what's happening? What are some of the biggest problems or challenges you're dealing with right now? And if maybe they say, Tom, our biggest problem is I still have a quota to hit. I don't have quota relief. Okay. I don't have quota relief and I still have to meet my monthly targets. And I just don't know how I'm going to do it because all my customers are hard to reach and I don't know how to sell to them remotely. I said, well, you know what? We might have something that can help you. Do you want to talk about that? That is all about selling with compassion, right? So it's buyer first. It's also sharing readily. So being completely transparent and empowering your buyer with information. So there used to be a time back in the dark ages where the salesperson was like the gatekeeper of all the intel. And that to get any information, you had to talk to me, book a call, book a demo. You got to talk to me. That's too pushy and people don't always want that. So having a buyer first mindset is like, hey, you know what, Andrea, look, maybe you're not ready to talk. I've got a couple of resources you might find useful. Let me send it to you. Let me know what you think. If it resonates with you, if it's cool, I'm happy to hop on a call, but we don't have to, you know? So giving information to people and not feeling insecure that, oh my God, if I share this content, they're going to know everything and won't call me. That scarcity mindset just doesn't work. Empower your customer and let them make their own choices. Solve, don't sell. So, you know, measure your success in the problems you solve, not just the products you sell.
Yeah.
Are you solving real world problems for your customers? That's how you can measure your value as a salesperson. Are you solving problems? The sales will come. Don't be sales focused. Focus on solving problems. And part of that's delivering value. So even after you close the deal, see that relationship through long after the deal's closed. Check in with people. Ask how they're doing. Don't make it one and done. You close the deal and you move on to the next person on your list. Check in with people. You know, like I've got people in my life, vendors in my life that I never hear from. And they just contact me every year to try to renew something.
Yeah.
Well, you're at the mercy of me changing my mind and going with someone else that's going to woo me and take care of me. So it's very dangerous. So are you staying on top of your key accounts and looking after them? And again, that's all just part of selling with compassion, like checking in. How you doing? You said your family had COVID last week. How's everything going? Just check in to check in, not check in to be like, how are we doing on that proposal? Check in because you care about them, not because you're trying to close that deal. So some of this stuff to me is common sense, but it's not common practice. And it doesn't happen in most of the sales world. But if you're doing a Soco jam, if you're doing a Soco program, this is what we talk about. This is how you can be effective in sales. You want to get better at sales, just be a better person. Try that. Earn your trust. Try that. Try being a nice person, you know, try to help people. Earn their trust. Like act in their best. Last thing I'll say, Joe, act in your customer's best interest. Like I've even told customers no to something because I could try to close this deal, but it's not what they need right now. It's not what they need.
Just before you mentioned the last thing you said, I was just thinking to myself the number of times that I've seen salespeople not representing good things, but just following those rules of being nice and checking in and all that, and that really works. It works a charm. I mean, you know, I always try to learn from people, even that I don't respect. I'll learn some lessons, and I've seen and met some salespeople who are just so good at what they do. Of course, they were selling terrible things, but you know, they were just really good at the sales process.
Right, right. Yeah, well, I'll say one thing too is, you know, we actually never work with customers that we feel sell terrible things. So that's kind of my own little ethic thing, that there's some industries that I just kind of stay away from because do I really want to help you get more people to smoke cigarettes? I don't. I tell my kids that smoking is stupid. So how can I take money from a company to help them sell more? So I'm not judging anybody, but that's kind of how my mind operates. Like I literally put my money where my mouth is, or I don't put my money where they want to put a smoke. I don't know, but I won't do it. And that's just me, right? So some industries are fine. I would never like firearms. Like there's like, why do I want that in the world? Like, I don't want that.
I've turned down a lot of business from Venezuela.
Okay.
So for me,
baby formula.
Yeah, baby formula is a great example of defense industry.
For me, I don't have a beef with I don't have a beef with some pharma because I know some of our customers do amazing things to actually help people live. like Roche and companies like that. So like, I don't have a beef with like, everybody in every space, but I am the kind of guy that when I hear something and if it doesn't sit well with me, I immediately tell my team, yeah, hi, we're not going to sell to this company, MLM and all that nonsense. I hate that shit. Like, why would I want to help these people? And people who do MLM, they're not bad people. I feel like they've just been taken advantage of.
What's MLM? Sorry.
Multi-level marketing.
Oh, right. Yeah, of course.
Amway and all that stuff. And like,
I don't have a problem with them. I have a problem with the pyramid scheme. I don't have a problem with MLM. But yeah, well, I'm the same with you with regards to cigarettes. No.
But let me tell you why I have a problem with MLM is because it's a pyramid scheme with a product. So let's just keep it real. They make their money by recruiting distributors. They don't make their money selling that frickin' water filter. That's just the fact. And I've also seen stats that show literally like only 1 or 2% of people actually make any money in MLM. So the way it's set up is like they can't win. So I tell them, I say, look, why would you want to sell something where there's already a stigma against it? Like if an MLM person knocked on your door today or sent you an email, like, what's your first reaction? Hey, tell me all about it. Or like, dude, I'm out. I don't need this. So if you're going to put your entrepreneurial and your sales efforts anywhere, why would you put it in an industry where people already hate it and it's already got a bad rep? Put your efforts towards something that people want. So for me, I remember I did one event. I was hired by one company a few years ago. And I was really talking to the team about, should I do this keynote or not do this keynote? Because I really like those people. Like those people in the audience were so awesome and nice, right? And I want them to win. But then when I look at the people who pay me, I'm like, but I don't feel like this system is set up for you to win. And I don't feel like no matter what I tell you today that you're going to win. You're going to try really hard and you're going to do a lot of the things that I said if you're one of the few that actually do. But I actually don't think it's right for you and you're not going to win. So they approached me for a follow-up because people really loved it. And they were like, Tom, let's do another one. And I was like, I'm good. They didn't ask me why, and I'm glad they didn't. But I was like, I'm just not available on those days. And every day they put, I'm like, yeah, it's not a good fit, And I tried to bow out nicely. But it's just not for me. I feel like there's so much out there. But I tell Elaine and my team, I'm like, dude, there's so much out there that I don't even need to do this. Do you know what I mean? Like, and ethics sometimes can be, let's all be honest here on the call. Ethics can sometimes be whatever, fluid. Okay. If you've got nothing going on in your life and you've got to feed your family and someone dangles 10 grand in front of you for an hour, maybe you go, well, the ethics of this and helping my family through this crisis are stronger than my ethics against this. So I'm just saying that moral, sometimes
the ethical dilemma. Yep.
Yeah. Right. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful to be in a position where we've got more than enough work to keep us busy, that we can say no to lots of things so that we have room to say yes to the things that we want.
Yeah.
Nice.
Because every gig you do for someone you don't want is a gig that you're not doing for someone that you do want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And it's good to have that position. All right. Tom, thank you. We're not going to have time to go through the environment stuff, but I want to encourage everyone. So the World Meteorological Organization released the 4 key climate change indicators that broke records in 2021. Sorry.
Say that fast 5 times.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not doing too well. But anyway, it's greenhouse gas concentration, sea level rise, ocean heat, and ocean acidification. Oh God, I can't talk anymore. What's happened to me? That's it. Anyway, new records in 2021. It's not a good report. There's a couple of articles on it, and we're in trouble. Like, I think we understand that. AMOC, do you guys know AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation?
No, I assumed that was a Marvel supervillain.
No.
Yeah.
So anyway,
running amok.
This, if you've seen Day After Tomorrow, where the ocean currents, right? So moving heat up, moving cold water down, that sort of stuff. Very, very important. I was reading that it's going to stop soon, and it'll go through a whole big reconfiguration, and it'll basically that will change the whole sort of chemistry of Earth. And somebody said between June and August, the weather in the UK is going to go down to -18 to -15. So that's exactly when I'll be there with the boys. So I'm hoping the boys get their first taste of cold and then stop asking to live in a cold country because they've never have. Anyway, lots going on. Deep sea mining, it's all guns blazing, and we start messing around at the bottom of the ocean and it ripples up, and the ecosystem that it impacts as it goes up. We saw 91% of the coral reef and Great Barrier Reef is now bleached from last week. So there's a lot of stuff going on. Please pay attention. We're in trouble, and we need to start acting. But yeah, so is there any final news that's been going on this week that's caught your attention, guys?
Well, let me just say something, that there's two things I think we need to do. I think I love this, Andrea. I think there has to be a call to action for us as individuals. Like, what are you going to do to reduce your carbon footprint? I think we all have to be thinking about that. I will also say that you alone, and this isn't a cop-out, but you alone, us alone as individuals, are not going to have the biggest impact. We've got to lobby governments and get them to frickin' do what they need to do the right thing. So I've always had this beef against people who are like, oh, don't fly business class. Oh, okay. So I'm the reason why the ozone's messed up, because I flew business class. Okay. I'm a consumer and I'm given a choice of something, right? So we need to start incentivizing the behaviors that we want and disincentivizing the behaviors we don't want. Petrol, for example, should be way more expensive than it is right now. It should be way more. And anybody who complains about it is getting a taste of frickin' reality. It should be way
subsidized.
More. It shouldn't be subsidized. We should be subsidizing frickin' solar. Every EV should be subsidized, not the other way around. You understand? So our priorities are completely messed up. So from a legislative level, I think we elect people that we hope are going to do the right thing, that need to mandate certain things. Don't give me an option for frickin' plastic bags at a grocery store. Don't even give me the option. Get rid of them. Get rid of them. And don't charge me for it, because I'll pay for it. Get rid of them. Stop the things that you don't want and do the things that you do want. I don't think it's that hard. If there's a will, there's a way. But there's too much money involved here, that there's too much influence from certain folks and lobbies that keep the status quo until those big energy companies, they finally come around kicking and screaming, and now they're doing solar. But when everyone else wants to do it, they squash them and say it's too expensive, it won't work, and put disincentives on them. But when they're ready, so it's like those with the money, they get to form the rules, but it's got to be turned around, right? So lobby your governments, get them to do what you want them to do. Don't vote for anybody that doesn't do what you frickin' want them to do. They are called public servants. They need to serve the public. Okay.
So one of my epiphanies after COP26 was the
vote
message
for me in 2025. I don't know for what, but anyway.
No, but the message that really came through clear. So governments won't do what they need to do until we vote for them to do what they need to do. So when people say that our individual actions don't matter, I actually think our individual actions matter more than we actually give it credit for, because when we change how we live in the world, we then expect our leaders to change how they govern. But until we accept what we need to do and reduce our lives and restrict things in our lives and all the stuff that comes with it, you can see a lot of the voting that's going to happen in these 12 months. It's going to be punishing those in power because people are suffering. The government isn't necessarily responsible for the suffering that's been created, and there's a lot of other reasons where the suffering has come from, right? So we need to start to come together and to accept the suffering that comes with reducing our impact collectively, and we need 1 billion people doing this before the leaders will ever be in place. And businesses aren't going to change while we're still spending. So it's a collective effort that we've all got to do. But the more, even the basic things like stop driving a car.
It's collective individualism.
But we do. And
yeah, 100%. Look, case in point, organic food better than non-organic food, healthier. Eating less meat, looking at alt proteins, That's good. Let's not kill animals. That's a nice thing. Let's not kill animals. Okay, like we all like to eat food. I love a good hamburger. Don't get me wrong. I love it. Love chicken. Sorry, but is that what we should be doing as a species? Like farming life to kill them and eat them? I don't think so. I think we have a higher calling. We can do better. All these cows, the environment, don't get me started. And Andrea, you know much better about this than I do because you're all in. So the environmental impact of livestock, devastating. Mm-hmm. So one thing that I do, I'm actually a volunteer mentor for an incubator, a group called Big Idea Ventures. And Big Idea Ventures is supporting the world's biggest challenges by supporting the world's best entrepreneurs. And it's like food tech and alt protein and agri-tech and all this kind of stuff. And I volunteer my time with them and work with some of their cohorts. It's Big Idea Ventures. They're doing like, cheeses and like all this stuff, but alt proteins, right? And they're asking for so much money. So I help them with their pitches and all of this kind of stuff. They had a demo pitch day yesterday, which was really cool. So I like to support them for free because I want them to win. Like I want these guys to get some funding. But why do they need to fight hard to get like $1 or $2 million funding to try to launch something? And it's going to be expensive. Consumers aren't going to buy it if they can buy chicken, which is so cheap. It's insane. You can buy a whole freaking chicken for like $3. It shouldn't be that way. That way because there's so much subsidies on that and corn and all this kind of stuff.
It's also full of chemicals and antibiotics and, if you're going to... Chicken's like the least harmful meat, right? So if you're going to eat any meat, stick with chicken. But
it's full of hormones, right? So people that are trying to do good for the world, whether it's alt energy, alt protein, alternative meat, like anyone who's trying to do good for the world, they have this uphill battle. Yeah. But those that are harming the world, it's just so easy for them to keep doing it and they get the subsidies and they get what they want. So we need to turn things around. There should be taxes on these bad things and subsidies to get people to consume the things that we want them to consume that we know is good for the world. So anyway, do what you can.
We just need to find the plans for the Death Star. If we can find the plans, we can destroy the whole thing.
They're on Sierra.
There'll be a Lego box somewhere. All right.
Speaking of which, I'm looking forward to the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that starts on Disney Plus in about a week or two. I can't wait. That's going to be a nerd's dream.
I've been taking Zoe through all the Star Wars. We've just finished. Return of the Jedi.
Okay, cool. Episode 6. There you go.
Yeah. So we've done Rogue One and Solo in between. So we've sort of kept it in order.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Good. You're doing it chronologically, but not in the order.
Chronologically, we didn't go into the Clone Wars or anything like that. That would have been.
We didn't do the prequels.
Well, no. We did the prequels of the movies, but we didn't do Clone Wars the series, for example.
The Clone Wars animated series, which is 7 seasons. Yeah, you didn't get around to the 7 seasons.
It should be like 15 before she saw the rest of the Star Wars things. If that was,
I will say though, Tim, the Clone Wars animated series, the best Star Wars storytelling of the whole franchise.
Yeah, I remember you saying it was fantastic. And
oh my god, you know what you should do? I'm going to send you a link or something. Watch the last 4 episodes of the series. Heartbreaking. It's amazing. That transitions right into episode 3.
Nice.
It's amazing. So anyway, check that out. The last 4 episodes. I'll follow up.
I won't watch the last 4 because I do want to watch the whole thing. So
it's 7 seasons, bro.
I know, but I mean, I got a 6-year-old. Once she's into
I will send you a link of the 10 must-watch episodes because you don't have to watch everything of every season.
All right.
I'm going to send child services over to Bishan.
That's okay.
All right. So apart from that, what are you watching, reading, listening to, being distracted by, Tom? So you're getting ready for Obi-Wan Kenobi next week,
ready for Obi-Wan Kenobi. Just finished watching The Dropout on Disney Plus. That was really cool. About Theranos.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You should watch that. That's a really good series. It's a 6-part series about the whole Theranos story. It's that Amanda Siegfried plays her.
Okay.
It's really good. She's got her mannerisms down. It's a really good series called The Dropout. So that's been really fun. And then for crazy eye candy, stupid stuff, we watch Selling Sunset on Netflix.
Okay.
Selling
It's fun.
Sunset. Okay.
Selling Sunset. It's Kardashians meets Real Housewives meets Shark Tank.
Oh, God.
What?
That just sounds like a nightmare to me.
It's so much drama.
Ooh.
It's catty real estate agents in California. It's great because like we like to watch it for the drama and the look and everything, but also like they're realtors, so we like the business to sales part of it too. It's actually it's a really gripping. It's a fun show.
I can imagine that'd be interesting. Yeah. Okay, Joe.
Yeah.
I want to use a bit of my time to give a plug to the Singapore government for what it's doing with regard to the government. They're taxing fuel, and you get a $45,000 discount for getting an EV in Singapore before 2023. So take that.
Well done, SG.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Okay,
and
in terms of,
EVs and sell them in 2024, I'll make a profit.
you might.
And if I'm not wrong, Joe, they've also changed the COE category for these EVs, so it's also in a less expensive category. So that was a really great move as well.
Yeah, so it's all totaled up to represent about a $45,000 discount. The problem is us, really, because we're the ones who bid things up and make them expensive. So while all these subsidies should bring the price down, we really want EVs, so we're making them expensive from a demand perspective. So we do have to do a lot more than what, like Singapore's always been this great example to me. It's made everything unaffordable, and yet we determine that we want to afford it. So we're a weird bunch, and a good example of how it's not about what government can do. I think it needs to go a bit further than that. We do need those UFOs to land and blow up something. In terms of what I've been watching, I found myself on Amazon Prime, and the two shows. One is 9 Perfect Strangers, which I think you'll enjoy. I think I mentioned it once before. I finally finished the series. That's the one that has Nicole Kidman, Jennifer.
How many seasons?
It's just one season, and it's a mini series, so it completes. It's a very good show. The other show that I've been watching, which again has not been very good for the brain, is a show called Last One Laughing. There's an Australian one and there's a Canadian one. The Australian one is hosted by Rebel, and what they do is they put 10 comedians into a room for. It's essentially 6 hours, and the job
we're just apologizing to each other the whole time.
And you cannot laugh. So they're doing their best to make each other laugh, but no one is allowed to laugh. And what happens is, as 10 comedians are likely to do once they haven't got a laugh for 3 hours and 4 hours, they get increasingly desperate, and it's a mixture of pain and delight to watch this particular show happen, and I won't spoil how it evolves, but it's quite a concept. So imagine people who need oxygen being deprived of it, and the only way they can get it is to get someone else eliminated.
Well, thanks, Joe. I just put 9 Perfect Strangers on my watch list on Amazon Prime.
Yeah,
cool.
And Last One Laughing. All right, Tim, did you
Star
cover
Wars.
yours? Yeah,
We've been
all
doing
right.
Star Wars, yeah.
So going back to Rebel Wilson, so she released her movie Senior Year on Netflix.
Yeah.
Have you seen anything about that?
Yeah.
I absolutely love Rebel Wilson. I think she's absolutely brilliant, but I still don't feel that she can carry a movie in her own right yet. And it's been getting great reviews and everyone loves it, but she's just not quite there for me yet.
Which movie is this again on Netflix?
It's called Senior Year.
Year.
So she basically has a concussion and wakes up 20 years later, and she has a concussion just like weeks before her graduation. So there's lots to the story, but I don't. Everyone loves it. Great.
Oh yeah, she's kind of fun. She's funny.
Yeah, she's brilliant. We
It's
also
number 1 in movies in Singapore today.
or worldwide. It was like the highest watched movie on the day of its release on Netflix.
It's just frustrating to everybody who writes real movies, really, because it's a terribly written movie. It's not ready for prime time, but it's a movie that got made, and people love it. So it's for the artist. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I also decided to give Roe versus Wade documentary on Netflix a watch. Within 2 minutes, I said, I don't want to watch this. And we started watching The Crown again from the beginning because it's so ugly. It's just so ugly. The conversation, what people say, how they feel. It's sad. It's depressing. So if you want to educate yourself about the whole Roe versus Wade story, yeah, it's definitely there. But I know
and
that
you
I
know
can't
the
watch
Democrats, the Democrats could protect women's rights right now if they wanted to because they have a majority. But what they're doing is they're holding that over the voters to get them to vote for them, and that's the carrot they're dangling. It's pretty gross. They've got a majority, and they could solve this right now if they wanted to.
Do they have a majority?
Of course they do.
Technically, they have a majority, but there's one person in that majority. It's one person majority, and then they've got that guy. What's his name? Who keeps basically siding with the Republicans, so they don't technically have a majority.
It's one of those issues that we see this time and time again when people do have a majority and they have the power to do the right thing. They find a reason or an excuse why they can't do it, why this isn't the right time, and why we really need your support. We need you to vote for us in the midterm elections so that we can do it later.
Yeah. They just need to stop playing games with each other and start serving their community, because that's what they're supposed to do. Anyway, let's wrap it up. We've gone well over, but we thought we would. And Tom, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, a lot of fun.
About all sorts of stuff.
This was like the Joe Rogan experience. We went on for hours. It's great.
That quote needs to go into our marketing. Although we may attract all the wrong people.
Well, I did put out some misinformation, so it's very much the Joe Rogan experience.
All right.
Well, it's great. It's great that we can all just kind of share our experience. So it's been a lot of fun. Thanks everyone.
Appreciate it. All right, I'm going off live now, so say goodbye. All right.
See you all. See everybody.
Have a great weekend, everyone.